welcome, welcome. Hi, friends. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast. And let me just say, I am so grateful that you are here. If you're watching this in the chat, please let me know where you're watching from if you can hear me. This is going to be an extraordinary episode. It's going to leave you on the edge of your seat, I am sure. Some of you may even clutch at your pearls, but it's okay. All right. I just want to reassure you I have been saved and washed clean by the blood of Jesus before I get into this. All right. It's so beautiful how the Lord brings us all together, his children from all over the world and all walks of life. Oh, look, you're all here, saints. Thank you so much for joining me. So if you don't already know by now, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm shaking. I'm so nervous to do this. So I'm Kayla Bortic, and today we're diving deep, real deep, into my testimony of how I have been saved, redeemed, healed, and set free by Jesus Christ. I am so nervous about sharing my testimony because it is the most vulnerable parts of myself. The only person in the entire world who knows this whole story is my husband. And truth be told, I've been too ashamed to share this with anybody. But shame is not our birthright, it belongs to Satan. And there's a reason why shame was the very first sin that he let into the Garden of Eden. Now, before we get started, I need to give you the heads up. This episode is not suitable for kids under 18, which is kind of crazy to say because many of the events that I'll be sharing happened when I was just a child. So I need to just give you a little heads up that this is definitely not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But there is a happy ending, okay? So our journey together on this podcast is all about equipping the saints, which is you lot, for spiritual warfare. Oh my gosh, look at you all. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, okay. If I look at the comments, I'm going to start crying because you're just so kind. Okay, so what better way to start and to kick things off with this first episode than introducing myself through the lens of my own story, right? But this isn't just about me, it's about the incredible power of God's redeeming love. And that's the point of everything. All too often in our lives, we blame God for things that were never his plan for us. But even in the darkest places, his light is a lamp to our feet. Can I get an amen? The most beautiful flowers bloom in the deepest soil, and the strongest trees grow by the harshest storms that it's had to endure, right? And you, my friend, will not grow in shallow places either. Amen. So before I begin, I just kindly ask you to please share this out from wherever you're watching it from, because there is someone you know that needs to hear this message. Our individual testimony has the power to set so many people free. And today I'm going to walk you through all the shades of darkness I've faced and prove to you that nobody is ever too far. I'm going to start crying. Nobody is ever out of reach of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. If he can turn my story around, he can turn it around for anybody. So with that being said, are you ready? Please drop some flame emojis in the chat for me and let me know that you're ready. Amen. Oh, thank you, saints, interceding for me. Thank you, Sherry. God bless you. All right. All right, saints, grab a cuppa, get cozy, and have your snorkel kit ready because we are going to dive deep into how grace rewrote my story. Oh my gosh, I haven't even begun. Oh, wow. Okay, let's do this. My mother was previously married and had a child, which is my older half sister. After her divorce, she met my father, who was quite affluent. He too had a child from a previous marriage, though tragically, his child and ex wife have kept their distance even to this day. Now, my father was a man of many talents. He owned an engineering business, held a pilot's license, and came from a long lineage of hardworking farmers. My parents married within weeks of knowing each other, literally a month. They had my brother quickly after marrying. I was born 18 months later, and then they had another son, my little brother, who was born 3 years after me. Now, I love my family and I don't want to speak badly of them, but what I will do is stick to the facts of my life. So, just to reiterate, my parents are married. I have an older half sister to my mother's previous marriage. She's 12 years older than me and she lives with us. Okay. And I have an older half brother to my dad's previous marriage, but I've never met him before. And I have an older full brother and a younger full brother to my parents. So, all five of us live at home together. And as for aunties, uncles, grandparents, cousins, all of them, we rarely ever see them at all. So I don't really have a connection at all outside of my immediate family, as far as family is concerned. So I could literally count on one hand how many times I've ever seen them in my life, actually. So the first 6 years of my life seemed to be a pretty normal upbringing. We lived on the central coast of Australia, but I've been told that the trouble at home started long before I can even remember. My mother told me my older brother put my head through a wall when I was just 3 years old. So the violence and abuse started when I was very young. At age 6, something significant happened that changed everything. My father owned Australia's first mechanical lathe and had a very successful engineering workshop. He built some of the foundations for Luna Park in Sydney, Australia, that hold up the actual face of it. If you don't know what Luna Park is in Australia, it is a fundamental, I want to say, pillar of Australian history. It is a big theme park that's been there for many, 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 many years. And he also made the structural beams for the Crown Plaza at Terrigal on the Central Coast, and they're both still standing today. He was offered a government contract for submarine manufacturer, but it was after declining this government offer that things took a turn for the absolute worst. I know that my parents made some huge financial mistakes, but what happened next was completely over the top and purely demonic and evil. The banks conspired with the landowner to close my father's workshop, his engineering business, down. They tried to repossess the lathe, which was unsuccessful, so it ended up in the courts. My father witnessed corruption at the highest levels. He entered a courtroom early and witnessed cash being exchanged from the banks to his own lawyer before losing that day. He was threatened. His life was threatened. They threatened our lives, his children, to a point where my mother had to warn the school that we were attending that we were not to be let out with anyone other than our parents. The banks tried to repossess our car, which we actually owned outright, and break into our house to take our possessions while we were all locked inside the home and my father was at work. It was so scary to live through this as a young child and to know about corruption and evil at the highest levels of this world that most people are completely, to this day, oblivious to. To give you an idea of how evil it was, one of the judges in my father's case was eventually convicted of SA with children. So I'm going to get banned if I actually say the word. So I'm hoping you're picking up what I'm dropping when I sort of give abbreviations to things like that. SA with children, and that man, that judge, is currently serving a long prison sentence for it. The long and short of it is, though, through my father's own mistakes, he uncovered a deep corruption within the courts and banking system, and they tried to destroy him for it. So then, for the next over 7 years, my father was fighting in the courts. He went all the way up to the High Court and even wrote to the Prime Minister at the time of Australia, and his name was Paul Keating. The court documents revealed that the Prime Minister, Paul Keating, responded to the opposition, stating, "Do with this family as you will," which was my family he was referring to have destroyed. The only good thing to come of it was a law that was passed that would prevent banks from taking people's private possessions that weren't tied to any loans. But for us, those 7 years destroyed my home. My father couldn't control his emotions, spending long days in court, mocked, and seeing the evil and corruption play out before him. And he came home and took it out on his children. All the evil he saw in the court, he brought home to unleash on us. Before the court cases, he would come home with toys. I had expensive clothes. We lived on the beach in an affluent area of the Central Coast, and I was enrolled to attend a prestigious grammar school. I was headed for a very different life. But afterwards, my father chose to fight 7 years to try and get back what he lost, and it destroyed him. That stubbornness caused him to lose everything. He was so angry at what happened to him and his family. He was determined to fight for justice against this evil. He had a commercial pilot's license, but instead of getting a job as a pilot to support his family or starting another engineering company, he fought in court. He went bankrupt. We lost the house, and I lost my father to the evil that consumed him. My mother tried to hold on to the lifestyle for a while. We moved around from house to house, and I rented once again in an affluent area called Avoca Beach in a beautiful big pole house that had lakeside views instead of being frugal with their money. Because my father stopped working full time to fight in court, eventually the money ran out and we had to move again. We moved to a few different houses in a short period of time, every 6 or so months, before moving inland to an outback rural Australian community where my life got even worse. But before I get to that, let me show you my life from ages 6 to 12. As a little girl, I had the prophetic anointing. I knew things about people and events I couldn't have possibly ever known, and it freaked out the people around me, especially my mother. It was not nurtured. I was gaslit and suppressed or even punished by her because she likes to live in a fantasy world, and my prophetic gift was delivering the truth. My father had an awareness that I was special, but he didn't know how to deal with it. He never said much about that, but he was a lot more open minded than my mother. I had a strong awareness of the Lord. I knew who Jesus was and I would talk to him daily, but it was from a young girl's perspective who wasn't initially raised in a church. So it was an inherent knowing rather than something I was ever taught who Jesus was. I could also see very clearly into the spirit realm from a very young age. I was very aware of demons. They would torment me at night. I was also aware of angels too. But I remember calling out to my father when I was frightened in the middle of the night because the window was shut, but my bedroom curtain would move. And he would come in. I would scream out for him because I was so scared. And he believed me, but he would say, whatever it is cannot hurt you. So I was tormented in my dreams with nightmares of trying to run away. The dreams were always the same, similar situation. Like the moral of the story of the dreams, it was always about me running, trying to run away from evil, but never being able to escape it. It was like these weird dreams of just running from evil, but this like demon's hand would grab me. These are what these dreams were like when I was younger. I think it's fair to say that there has been a spiritual battle over my life since I was born. I also believe that Satan can see someone's anointing and he tries everything he can to destroy that person so as they never reach the plans God has for them. And as you're about to discover, Satan did that with me. My early childhood years didn't really fit in with the other kids. I was in an affluent area, but as my parents' money was drying up, they couldn't afford to keep up with appearances with the branded clothing and things like that. And the kids at school were mean to me because of that. On top of that, my older brother started bullying me at school. And then on top of that, there was a lot of chaos and abuse going on in the home. And then on top of that, I had a prophetic gift that would freak people out. Really, it's not. It might seem like it's a party gift, but it's not. It's not a good party gift when you don't know what it is. So I was obviously seen as a very strange kid, and it was a recipe for literally being set apart from everybody else. The theme of loneliness weaves a picture of deep sorrow throughout my entire life. I have one strong memory from my first year of school. I was 6 years old, and it was just after all the chaos with my father had started. I had this teacher, her name was Mrs. Jordan. It's funny how you remember these teachers' names from so long ago, who was known to be nasty to the children, and she was a bully. She used to literally hit us on the arm with a ruler. One morning, I turned up to school late. I must have looked an absolute mess. I remember being beaten by my father that morning and then dumped at the school late. I was just bawling my eyes out. I walked up to the classroom door and I was frightened to go in because this teacher was so nasty towards us and I thought she was going to hit me too. But the most extraordinary thing happened. She spotted me and told the class to keep busy and she rushed outside to me. She got on her knees and gave me a big hug and told me it'll be okay. I believe so strongly that when we look back over our life, we can see the hand of God where he sends people to us in moments of despair. I'm sure you can recognize those moments in your own life. When you look back, you will see the hand of God that has moved over your life in those moments of despair to nurture you and to love you in those times of desperate need. Because this experience with this teacher was completely out of character for her. I mean, kids would literally get in trouble for being late, and I believed God softened her heart to send me a message that I was loved. And I'm sure if you reflect on your own life too, you will see moments where God has moved his hand all throughout it. Type amen in the chat, actually, if you can recall some of those memories. Obviously, the abuse started very young for me. So let me tell you a little bit about my father. My father was a kind-hearted man, but he struggles so badly with how to express his emotions in a healthy way. He is definitely on the spectrum for sure with Asperger's. He's highly intelligent when it comes to anything to do with numbers and could fix literally any piece of mechanical or electrical equipment that was broken, but he couldn't fix his own family. That'll preach. He's born in the 1940s and raised as a grazier in on a farm in outback Australia. He was the first born and attended boarding school up until the age of 10 years old, when his parents pulled him out to work full time on the farm and learn off his father. I never met my grandfather, which is his dad, but I'm told he was a very hardened man. My grandmother, who was my dad's mum, was a really loving, kind-hearted woman who later in her life went blind and used to weave baskets and knit toys for us as children, all while she was blind. It was incredible. She used to knit like these little cats, and she would send them in the mail, and I'd be like, how did she know how to put the eyes on the cat when she doesn't have eyes? It was extraordinary that she was doing this. So my father would give the shirt off his back to anyone, and has many times. If you asked him for help, he would stop what he's doing right away and help anyone in need, regardless of whether he knew you or not. He does not have a filter, nor does he have any boundaries whatsoever. He's been known to pick up backpackers and give them a lecture about getting a job while driving them to their destination. His main priority was to protect and provide for the most part. He did try to do this, but his stubbornness and asphyxiation on problems, particularly the banks at this point, would get in the way of the bigger picture. And he can also become easily distracted, which I believe is how Satan tugged at his weakness, like a loose thread that unraveled, and which then unraveled the stability in our home. And that's what Satan does. And you'll notice that he's a little bit of a one-trick pony, but he has trends. And that's one trend that Satan does. He pulls on your weaknesses, okay? And he will use them to distract you away from God's plan for you. That's actually a very important thing. You have to know that. I never saw my father beat my mother, but for me and my siblings, he used to beat us, and it wasn't a normal beating. He used to bash me like a full grown man in a bar fight. And then if I was to cry whilst getting beaten, he would beat me even more. You are not allowed to cry. That's a heavy impossibility of a child that's getting beaten. And these beatings weren't short 10-minute outbursts. They would carry on for hours, hours and hours on end. He didn't know how to control his emotions and had no boundaries. So I remember times when he would storm into the bathroom while I was having a shower and beat me in there too, because of something he thought you'd do wrong. My boundaries were crossed at such a young age. It set up for a terrible experience with men later on in life. I'm sure you can see where this will take a young girl, right? He was a very strict and stubborn man, and I was an exhausted child growing up with abuse happening on a daily basis in the home for years on end. I'd go to bed with getting belted, sometimes with an actual leather belt, other times have a steel cap boot thrown at me, literally anything, hair pulled and dragged along the carpet. Sometimes my ears would ring from being slapped across them constantly. The abuse was from my own father. The reasons for the beatings would vary, but none of them warranted the severity of breaking a child's spirit. My mother, on the other hand, is a completely different kettle of fish. My mother is an avoidant and a master manipulator. She was often jealous of any relationship my father and I had together. My mother was born in the most affluent area of Sydney in the North Shore, and her father and uncle were both Freemasons. They both attended regular meetings together. My grandmother, which is my mother's mum, was diagnosed with paranoia schizophrenia and used to abuse my mother because she was jealous of her relationship with her father too. So you see how this nasty Jezebel spirit was being passed down the family line on my mother's side. Not to mention the Freemasonry, if you know about that. Whenever there was any fight or family domestic in our home growing up, my mother used to go into her bedroom, close the door, and turn up the volume on the TV and pretend it wasn't happening. She would block out the sounds of her own children screaming, and I mean screaming out for help, because she'd rather pretend it's not happening than take responsibility of nurturing her own children when they needed her the most. Oh, eventually she did step in and tell my father he was not allowed to beat us with his leather belt anymore because it left big welts on us. But that never stopped us from being knocked out by a grown man beating a child for crying, or the many bones that were broken over the course of many years. Cannot believe this is my life. Thank you, Jesus. My mother is the queen of gossip, and she would gossip about each sibling behind our back and play my siblings all against each other. She claims she wants peace in the home, but she never did anything to provide that, except for painting a fairy tale picture and living in denial of what was happening, because it was easier for her to live in a comforting lie than for the light of the truth. My mother does not like the truth because it means accountability, and she will literally avoid any type of accountability at all costs. I remember when my dad was at work, my mother used to get and I used to get into fights together. I wasn't in school yet. I remember at 4 years old, she threw me into my bedroom. And then when I ran back to the door crying, she bit my fingers before closing the door on me. And then when my father would come home from work, she would lie and tell him I was misbehaving. My mother can look at you dead in the eyes and lie to you. She will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and she goes out of her way to portray herself as being a good person. That's the thing about glossy covers. You see, they reflect more than they reveal. My older sister was a cloned copy of my mother, and she is a textbook definition of Jezebel. She would torment me just for being alive. I remember she took joy in leaving indent marks from the rings she used to wear on her hands in my arm, punching me after school. She'd come home from school, or she would eat an avocado on the lounge, which my mother only bought for her, whilst proceeding to tell me how much she hates me. She'd punch me and then I'd cry, and then my mother would send me to my room. This was all happening before the age of 7 years old, and it was an ongoing occurrence. I do not have any happy memories with my sister. It wasn't like a normal sibling rivalry. She literally hated me because I was born. My sister used to invite my brothers into her bedroom and tell me to rack off. I don't want you in my room. Only they can come in. I would cry to my mother and ask her why was she being so mean to me. Her response was usually, I don't know, maybe because you're the other daughter and she could be jealous of that. This type of abuse went on for years until my sister moved out of home. Oh, you enjoyed a lot. I haven't even gotten started. Oh, wow. But praise the Lord. I don't look like what I've been through though, right? So just to paint this picture, this was all happening before I'm 7 years old. Looking back as an adult is so hard to believe. It's hard to believe that my own mother never stepped in and stopped the abuse my sister was doing to me. She knew it was happening, but she made excuses to justify it and allowed it to keep happening to me. She never did it around my father, just my mother, because she knew our mum would let her get away with it. Not having parents correct her behavior towards me set the tone for her to continue mistreating me well into my adult life. I remember being 5 years old and she was almost an adult, so 17 at the time. And the abuse I suffered by my own sister made me feel worthless. It really, really hurt me at a young age, and it shattered my self-esteem. She didn't have a legitimate reason for not liking me. It was the very existence of me that disturbed her. And for me to simply exist was painful for me. It made me feel like I didn't want to be alive. No 5-year-old child should ever have to suffer and be abused like that. This went on for years until my sister moved out of home. So I don't have any good childhood memories with my sister. She was the awful older half sister that used to kick our family dog because he was too happy for her. I used to cry to my father about it. Mostly he would understand and would agree, and he would see that she purposely is treating me badly compared to my brothers. My father was well aware that she was a liar and didn't have good intentions about her, but he did nothing to stop the abuse I've received, and mostly it's because he was at work or at court to see it. But my mother would see it, and my mother would lie about it happening. Then there was my older brother. I already told you that when he put my head through a wall at 3 years old, but now he was letting his pain out on me at school as well as at home. And I struggled to maintain any healthy relationship with friends. The way my sister treated me also set the tone for his abuse towards me. He was getting beaten at home by my dad too. So I understand that that this toxic cycle was repeating. But I think it goes to show you that in someone's heart, a lot comes down to somebody's heart, because no matter how they're treated, despite what they're going through, somebody can still have the heart to know not to treat others badly as well, just because it's happening to them. A lot comes down to somebody's heart. And the Bible also talks about this too. It really, truly does matter what's in your heart. So my brother chose to become the schoolyard bully. He would pick on everyone and was constantly getting suspended. I remember he would be playing soccer after school, then all of a sudden be in a fight with someone on the field. He would laugh at the special needs kids, and he ultimately became my biggest bully and source of pain. He used to sit next to me at home and repeat over and over. I'm talking over and over, like over and over and over and over and over. Fatso, 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 you're so fat. This had a significant impact on my developing brain, having it been drummed in my head for years. If I walked past him at school, he would point and laugh and have other kids do the same to me. Many times he would put his leg out and trip me in front of everyone. I could not catch a break. The environment at home was so volatile, I was getting bullied at school too. I would cry to my mother about it, but she did nothing to stop it. It was the same old, just ignore him. I don't know how anyone with any sort of mental stability is supposed to ignore abuse every day, but this was my reality, and it shaped me in the most awful ways growing up. My mother just made excuses for his horrible behavior or blamed me for misbehaving and deserving it. He would throw full, like, tin cans of food at my head, walk into my room at any given moment and break my toys or throw all of my belongings onto the floor. And even remember one time where he held my head underwater for so long, I honestly believed I was going to die. The only reason he let go of me is because my body went limp. As we got older, his behavior towards me got even worse. This is all happening before I'm 12 years old. My younger brother was the baby, and he was very mollycoddled. For the most part, he was sheltered from much of the violence, but he was certainly the instigator of many fights. He turned out to be the textbook description of self entitlement, because it was a very rare occurrence that he was ever held responsible for his actions. I honestly felt like whatever I wanted to do, he wanted to join into. And it wasn't because he loved or respected me as his sister. He just wanted what I had. I didn't have my own space in the world because it was overshadowed by what my younger brother wanted to be involved in, everything. As an example of this was like dance classes meant for young girls that he joined as well. And he was the only boy in the entire dance academy. Another example was my own birthday slumber party where I invited some schoolgirls over. My mother let them sleep out in the lounge room with us, and I wanted him to leave us alone. Oh my gosh. He kept annoying us and making silly noises, calling me names in front of my friends, and he just kept hitting us with pillows. So I kept telling him to go to his room. My father came out in a fit of rage, tore the blankets off me, hit me in front of my friends, and told me to go to my room. My brother laid there pretending he was asleep. I was mortified. I went to my room and cried myself to sleep at my own birthday party. This was a significant event for me because it highlights how irrational the disciplinary action was, and I couldn't trust my family to have friends over. I'm sure you're starting to see now how I was raised in a very dysfunctional and toxic, abusive home. Later in life, I learned that I was the designated family scapegoat. You can look that up, but psychologists have determined that the family scapegoat is the worst kind of abuse that any child can suffer. It literally trumps everything else, including SA, which is I don't want to get banned off here, so I'm just going to use abbreviations, okay? So to really highlight what this looks like for you, both of my brothers got two pets given to them as presents. in early years, a couple of dogs and a bunny rabbit and a hamster. I wasn't allowed to have a pet. My little brother received a brand new bike to ride around. I had an old rusty boy's bike that my father got for his son from his previous marriage. And when I asked to borrow my brother's bike that nobody was using, I would get yelled at and told that I have my own bike and to leave theirs alone. It was a constant double standard separating me from everybody else in the family. So that was my early childhood, constantly being abused by every single family member at home and at school, and then gaslit into believing it was my fault. And if someone wanted to abuse me, they can, and there was absolutely nothing that I could do about it. Oh, I haven't even gotten into it yet. This is just the beginning, friends. Hold on to your seats. So I bet you can already see by now that you're starting to see where this is going to lead for a young girl later in life, right? A childhood like this changes a child's developing brain. My nervous system was constantly in fight or flight mode. It caused a whole host of other problems for me physically and mentally. I was hyper vigilant. I was exhausted all the time, storing a little body weight because trauma affects digestion, and I had learning difficulties. Even though my IQ was literally tested by the school psychiatrist at 11 years old, the results showed I was highly intelligent. It's just with the trauma and abuse, my brain could not focus properly at school because it was always on alert for survival. When the money ran out, food also became scarce, which means we were not eating a nutritious diet. And I also remember fighting at the dinner table because there wasn't enough food to go around for everyone. I was literally fighting just to survive, and I wasn't even a teenager yet. Before I move on, I want to talk about my early years in the church because they were some of my fond memories I have of my childhood. When my father lost his business, we started attending church regularly. We started off as a local uniting church. Um, they're similar to a Southern Baptist church, in a way. But then we moved and attended a different uniting church, and it was there that I became best friends with the pastor's daughter. I remember being so excited to go to Sunday school, and they used to have this kids club that was on every Friday evening after school too. I loved the worship music and learning all about the Bible stories. I would have sleepovers at the pastor's house because I was friends with his daughter, and it was an eye-opening experience to see what a normal and loving home looked like. They would sit together around the dinner table, and he would ask how everyone's day was. Everyone got along. The mother was emotionally present, and it was just a wholesome home and provided moments of relief. And I didn't want to go back to my home where it was so chaotic. I wish I could tell you that my parents were addicted to drugs or alcohol because that would have made so much more sense and be more understandable explanation. However, the truth is they were both stone cold sober while all of this was happening. This made the situation even more confusing as they were completely sober and willfully chose violence over peace in our home. Their deliberate choice to condone such malevolent behavior only added to the trauma. Over the years of attending church, my love for God grew. I remember crying out to Him during the beatings and praying so hard for the abuse to stop. I prayed so hard to God to please take it away, just to take the pain away and to make it stop. Something that's really important to know is that your relationship with God is a reflection of your earthly relationship with your earthly father. So I started to think that the reason why God wasn't answering my prayers is because He hated me and because I was being punished. I started to view God the same way my own father was treating me. So now I'm 12 years old and things take a dramatic change once again. My mother's father dies, and that's the Freemason grandfather of mine. And my mother goes into an emotional tailspin. And at the same time, my father decides he's had enough of the city and wanted to move back to the outback, like where he was raised. This was the same time that he stopped fighting the banks. My older sister moves in with her boyfriend and stays in that area. My parents had also realized that they couldn't keep up with the Joneses. My mother's expensive fairy tale lifestyle of $200 handmade boho dresses made from silk and velvet wasn't going to work out for her because she couldn't afford rent at the same time. So they signed up for government housing, which is also known as the projects, and that's where we moved. At the same time, the Sydney Olympics were getting set up, and so all the riffraff was being shuffled off into these government houses in the outback of Australia. And so we just happened to move into that exact community. Just to give you an idea of how rough this new neighborhood was in the ghetto, Pizza Hut refused to deliver there. It was rough. Like it was rough. As we were preparing to move, my father flew into a fit of rage one night and beat me because he told me to go have a shower. And sometimes I didn't always do what he said immediately, mostly because I felt like I had absolutely no control in my entire life with everything that was going on around me and all that was happening to me. I had no boundaries, and I constantly felt like my life's existence was to be a boxing bag for my family's emotional baggage. There was also a lack of nurturing. Still, I wasn't a bad kid. I was just trying to survive while most kids were enjoying their childhood. So he told me to go have a shower, and when I didn't move immediately, he started hitting me. I ran downstairs from the living room, and he threw a steel cap boot at me on my way to the bathroom. He used to pull my hair during these fights, punch, slap, anything he could grab a hold of or do in these beatings in the heat of the moment. My ears would be ringing from slaps to the side of my head after a beating, and sometimes I'd even pass out mid beating because my entire central nervous system could not handle it anymore. Anyway, he caught up to me in the bathroom and I was backed up against the toilet. And while he was hitting me, I used my hands to protect my face until he eventually stopped and left. I had my shower. My arm was so sore. My entire hand looked deformed. I ran downstairs when the coast was clear to my mother, who was laying up in bed as usual, watching her TV shows, pretending like she didn't just hear what happened. I was crying to her, holding my arm close to my body, saying, "I think my hand is broken." She looked at me and yelled at me, "You're just causing trouble. Go to bed. Your father would never do that." She was angry with me for disturbing her. I was shining a light on a problem she didn't want to deal with. But as it turns out, my pinky finger was bent all the way around the other way. My mother didn't care. I think in her own mind, it was easier to pretend I was the problem than realize her own husband was an abusive man and she enabled this behavior because she never did anything about it. I went to bed that night nursing a broken finger that was bent around the opposite way on an arm that was black from the swelling and bruising. I woke up in the morning with my father yelling at me, ripping the blankets off the bed, and his red face screaming, "Get up!" He liked to hold a grudge and was still mad at me from the night before. I said to him firmly to take me to the hospital, and he just walked out of the room. I told my mother to take me to the hospital because something is seriously wrong. Imagine that. I am 12 years old. And the very people who are supposed to protect and love and provide for me needed to be told by a child to take me to the hospital because they broke my finger in a fit of rage. This is beyond neglect. It's malevolent behavior and it's pure evil. I lied for them in that hospital room. I told the doctor it was my fault and that I fell off my bike. My mother was given two options. Either I go in for surgery and they place a steel rod in my finger to bend it around the correct way, or they try and put me under happy gas and bend it around the right way. She opted for happy gas to give that a go first. Thankfully, by the grace of God, it worked, but I never got a thank you, and it took years later to ever get an apology. What I did get instead was years of them telling me that my dad never broke my finger and that I made the entire thing up. I literally had a plastic cast on my arm for 6 weeks, and them telling me I made it up. This level of gaslighting and manipulative behavior is the standard in my family home. Oh gosh. My mother would get angry and tell me I did it on purpose. They tried to manipulate me into thinking I did it to myself. That's what family scapegoating looks like. So now, in amongst the chaos of moving and my mother's emotional turmoil, I start high school with my arm in a plaster cast. My parents decide to enroll me and my two brothers into a private Christian school, even though they clearly couldn't afford it. To tell you this is a nightmare is an understatement. We are the poorest kids living in the projects in the worst part of town, going to the richest school in town. I knew my first day there I was in trouble. They asked me what happened to my arm, and I told them I fell off my bike to protect the truth about what my parents did to me. And the class started making a mockery of me and laughing. You would think that being a Christian school, they would be kind and compassionate, modeling Jesus. But these students were the exact opposite. I was bullied worse than ever before by being here. And then on top of that, my brother was being a bully and instigating the other kids to bully me as well. It was so horrendous. I used to spend the entire lunch in the toilet cubicle with the door locked. Because of everything going on in my life and the way that I was being treated within this so called Christian school environment, my only relief was attending a youth group at the church my family were attending. They didn't preach about the gifts of the Spirit, and I felt very misunderstood there because they were so strict. It's like the place was being operated by a religious spirit. It was dry, and the people were lukewarm in their faith. But I truly enjoyed the Bible studies we did together because they were my only place of refuge and peace. One day I managed to befriend another girl at school who was in a senior year, and she was attending another church's youth group. She invited me to attend with her, and I did. They were Pentecostal, and it was a completely different experience. Like, I don't know if anyone can relate to this in the comments, but if you've gone to like a somewhat of like a Southern Baptist church and then you go and step into a Pentecostal church for the first time, it is completely different. I had never felt so loved and welcome. There was a live band playing. We always used to singing hymns. There was a live band playing worship music, and it was like nothing I had ever witnessed, especially in a church. I could actually feel the presence of the Holy Spirit here. This was another moment where the hand of God moved in my life. The girls were all so nice to me there. They knew I didn't come from a good home, and they all got together and bought me my first study Bible. It was such a beautiful part of my young life. Seeds were planted there which have blossomed inside of me today. But unfortunately, the peace didn't last long. All the abuse was still continuing and getting worse, and the spiritual warfare over my life took another drastic turn. I was around late 13, early 14 years old when I made another friend from school. Her boyfriend was older than us, and he was a practicing Satanist who was also a weed dealer. I hated being at my house because of the abuse there. So we spent a lot of time at my friend's boyfriend's house after school. Her father was also very strict, so we had that in common. I love you, Jennifer. Thank you. It was there I was introduced to Satanism, and he had a satanic Bible from Anton LaVey. He had a set up altar, and I asked him a lot of questions. I was very curious. Like, what do you mean you're worshiping the enemy? What? Like, the doubts I started to have about God not hearing me when I would pray to him for help were being fed lies at this point now from the enemy that God was like this angry eye in the sky that would scold us and enjoyed punishing us, that Satan was the real victim in the story. And we could use and tap into many spiritual gifts that God forbids us to use. And it was here that I started developing an interest in the occult. I started so about 13, 14 years old. I started smoking weed because he was a weed dealer, and bought my first deck of tarot cards and and Wiccan books from the local witchcraft shop. I want to make it clear that this wasn't a new age store with crystals and love and light shop assistant. This was a legitimate witchcraft store operated by witches and warlocks. I found the shop to be so enchanting. It was dark, a little bit mystical, and so much different than the other shops in the mall with their, big glaring fluorescent lights. This place had soft music playing and books that spoke about things I had experienced and knew about in the spirit realm. I felt a sense of understanding and that I could take back control in my life, which I had never had. And that is all what these witchcraft and satanic books were talking about. And they were talking about the gifts that I had and my ability to use them. It was the first time in my entire life at this point where I felt like my prophetic gifts had a meaning and a purpose to them in the wide open arms of Satan himself. From here, as you can imagine, my life got progressively worse. I was in the middle of a tug of war happening on my soul. I had Jesus reaching out to me with support and love from the youth group, and then I had Satan perverting the truth. And it was the same old repackaged lie as he told in the Garden of Eden that I too could tap into forbidden knowledge and gain access to deeper, hidden answers, and I could instead rely on myself, which at that point in my life was seemed pretty amazing to do because uh, my life was painted with abuse and betrayal by those who claim to have loved me. This is what Satan does. He hooks into your wounds to lure you into his snare, keeping you away from God's purpose for you. Unfortunately, I didn't have the patience for God. I had a build-up of resentment towards him for not answering my prayers when I'd cry out to him for help. And Satan knew that, and he knew exactly which wounds to latch onto. I mentioned to the youth group leader that I had purchased a deck of tarot cards, but I didn't think that they were bad. The pictures were beautiful and it told a story and could give me answers. And she said to me, "The devil paints a pretty picture, which would be a seed that would later find water." I stopped attending the youth group and spent more time with my satanic friends getting high to avoid the pain of my life. Things at home were getting really bad at this point. The police were constantly being called to our home for violence, but they never did anything. So to paint a picture of how bad it was, I was in a fight with my father one night. I just turned around and ran out the front door. I ran so fast. I just kept running and running and running all the way down to the very end of our street where there was a tavern because I didn't know where else to go, where to turn. I just ran and I tripped over in the car park of this tavern and my father was right behind me and he grabbed me and he dragged me by my hair across the gravel. I was screaming for someone to help me, and it grazes up my legs and arms from being dragged. Someone did call the police and they showed up in the car as they usually do, but all they did was tell us to stop and sent me home back with him. Police were often called to our home, but my parents would lie and they usually just ruled down to misbehaving kids. One of the other girls I knew told me that she saw my father throwing rocks at me as I was running away from him another time. It was just horrendous, but no one ever tried to stop it. One day my older brother missed the school bus. And my father became so infuriated that he would waste his petrol driving him to school and he beat him severely. My brother turns up to school with a fresh black eye. He's only about 16 and welfare get called. Long story short, he spends some time in foster care and our family has to go through court ordered mediation. As part of the mediation, our family had to go to counseling. The first counselor told my mother that my father was abusive and that she had no control over her household and failed her children. Obviously, my mother didn't like that very much, so she shopped around for another doctor who would blame me instead. My mother realized that she had lost one child and I was next in line to be removed. As the family scapegoat, she knew if she could shift all the blame onto me, then she would get to keep her family together. To cut another long story short, she found a pediatrician who was willing to lie about me to get me on a drug trial called Risperdal. It's an antipsychotic medication for schizophrenics. The doctor literally had to lie to say I had schizophrenia because it was a controlled substance still in trial state. I don't have schizophrenia. You see, I was coming of age, finding my voice, completely filled with rage from all the abuse that I was enduring. And I was using my prophetic gift to shine a light on the truth. My mother wanted me heavily medicated to shut me up so she could hide the truth. The medication made me like a zombie. I was becoming more and more of a shell of a girl at school, and the kids started to notice. I'd have bruises and welts on me from being beaten, but because of the medication, I would constantly forget the lies I told to cover up the beating, so my story was always switching up. It didn't take much to put it together, so they told the principal, and welfare came to the school. Oh, Moira, I love you so much. Um, and so the welfare came to the school, and they asked me about the abuse at home. I was so reluctant to tell them. I was genuinely very, very frightened because I don't want to be the reason my family breaks up, but they promised me to take care of me if I told them the truth. So I did. So these two ladies from welfare drove me home, and they said that they will talk to my parents privately. So they went into the lounge room, and I just sat on the front porch steps. My parents convinced these child government abuse agents that I was the crazy one. Despite all the police reports and the mess with my brother, my parents convinced them that I was psychotic because they had the Risperdal and the doctor's reports now. And they said that I was lying about everything. Now, remember, my mother is a master manipulator with a Jezebel spirit and is very good at covering up lies. She came from an affluent family with a lineage of Freemasonry. So she really knows how to put on an act and make it look good. We had a wonderful home. Welfare just left me there that day because they believed my parents' lies. Let me tell you, I copped the biggest beating from my father that day because I told the truth to people who promised to help me and they failed at their job. Soon after that, I was expelled from the Christian school. The whole scenario was chaotic, to be honest. My parents couldn't afford to send us there. And because of the chaos happening at home, I could never complete any homework, which ended up being the last straw for me there. They expelled me because I didn't complete my homework. I stopped doing homework because either my father or my brother were beating me, or the power was shut off and I was doing homework under the street lights, literally sitting in the gutter. I started acting up in school to mask the fact that I was failing, and I'd get kicked out of class. I'd have my own desk in the corridor of maths block. It was literally just a really bad time coming into adolescence. So then the next school I went to wasn't any better. This was a state school, and it was filled with lower socioeconomic families. These children came from rough homes like me, only they turned out like my brother. I was beaten at school to a point by these kids that I was hospitalized. Literally, an ambulance turned up at school and put me into the back of it. I had my belongings stolen and broken while I was being beaten at school. My bag was thrown over the fence along with my books. And then, because the other kids had seen that happen to me, I was a weak target for others who wanted to claim some street cred. My life was threatened so many times just for being alive. I had so much pain and hurt inside of me by this stage that I completely turned away from God. I wore a pentagram around my neck and was doing spell work and started using heavier drugs. So I'm 15 years old now. At this new school, and my new friends group are all sexually active. I'm the only virgin, and even my own friends would make fun of me for it. So one day I meet this guy, we start dating, and unknown to me, my friends arrange with him to take my virginity. I didn't really want to do this at all, but I felt so pressured into it. Afterwards, the guy said he just wanted to sleep with a virgin. Then he broke up with me and he blocked me. This moment in time really broke me. I realized I had no sovereignty over my own body. I had been a punching bag for my family all my life, and this really opened the door to being sexually used by men. I went on a downward spiral, doing more drugs and avoiding going home because I wanted to avoid the violence there. I was a street kid just hanging out with rough people or at the skate park. Unfortunately, this led to more abuse. One night at the skate park, the boys I was hanging out with SA'd me. When I said no and told them to stop, they didn't. Because of all the beatings I had been subjected to, my fight or flight response is to freeze and submit. It's not that I want to do that, but it's how my nervous system is wired. So for me being assaulted, I didn't scream or kick or fight. I said, no, stop it. And when they didn't stop, I just froze. I couldn't move. I closed my eyes and they did what they wanted to me. I went home feeling so broken. My older brother was released from foster care and moved back home. He saw that I was a mess and questioned me about what happened. I was so ashamed and I didn't have the words to explain what happened. I didn't want to get anyone into trouble and I had to go to school with these boys and I was afraid of what might happen if I said anything. In the end, my brother assumed I was out choosing to be promiscuous and he verbally abused me and mocked me and blamed me for being a hussy. It was like rubbing salt into wounds. I felt so much shame and so dirty, but it just compiled on top of more and more trauma that was happening and feeling worthlessness and that I was just some rag doll. Anyone could do whatever they wanted to me. So not long after this, I remember one day after school, I met two men walking home. They were much older than me and invited me back to their place. I went back there because I didn't want to go home. We got high, had a few drinks. I was pretty out of it. I remember all of a sudden telling one of them to walk me home and that I was only 15 years old. This is another moment where the hand of God moved in my life. This guy actually walked me almost all the way home. When I got home, it was late and my parents had called the police because they thought I was missing and the police car was parked in our driveway. I told the police where I'd been and the names of these guys that I was fine and nothing to worry about, but the police were shocked. As it turns out, one of the guys I'd been with was a convicted murderer, and the other was a SA offender, and only both of them were only just let out of prison. It is only by the this dude walked me home. Like I thought he was a gentleman. It's only by the grace of God that I left there untouched. Things were getting really bad at school though. Okay. So by this stage, uh, I was an easy target. My fight response is to freeze, remember? So after a few fights, everyone saw that I just freeze and then everyone wanted to fight me and they could. So those boys were still there from the skate park and it was just awful. So I ended up leaving this school. The next closest school was a whole town away, about 30 miles. And it was honestly a blessing. So I'm going more further into the outback Australia. Like the dirt is red out there. The kids were so nice there. It's a small country town with maybe 150 students. My older brother wasn't there to bully me or turn people against me, and I became popular there. But there was still so much pain happening at home. It got to a point where I had enough and tried to run away. The school bus used to go past the train station, and one day I just told the bus driver to let me off there. I went into the station and was determined to run away. I didn't really know where I was going to go, but I needed to get away. One of the neighbors saw me there and called my father, thinking they were doing the right thing, right? Well, didn't that go down well? He came and got me, and I copped another beating for trying to run away. A short while later, completely broken, I lost it one day. My father was out, my brother was home and tormenting me. I completely cracked it. In a fit of rage, I had enough. I finally just snapped and I unleashed on him. My every single thing that I had been through up until this point, it all just started coming and pouring out of me. My brother didn't know what to do. He was literally overpowered by me and he just threw me into the bathroom and I kicked and screamed and trying to get out while he had the door closed. I think he genuinely thought that like, wow, like this is it. Like she's literally lost it. Maybe I've maybe pushed her a little bit too much. And he was genuinely scared of me and didn't know what to do. I guess he figured he could beat me into submission. So he'd open the door and just keep beating me and then quickly run out and leave me in there to cool down, but I didn't. The rage inside of me got louder and louder. After a few beatings, I had enough. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of this life. I'm only a teenager. Like what? It's too much. It's too much. I just want the pain to stop. I want the chaos to end. I should never have been born. I tried my belt around my neck and hooked it over the railing in the bathroom and knelt down and let my body weight do the rest. I went silent. My brother realized it was too quiet and something was wrong. So he opened the door and found me there trying to unalive myself. It turned into chaos. Someone had called the police. I remember being out the front yard wrestling with 3 or 4 policemen screaming at them. I was so distraught and angry at this point. I just wanted to end it all and not be here anymore. And now I'm fighting with people on my front lawn and I'm in trouble because I don't want to be here anymore. They arrested me and put me into the back of a police paddy wagon and I was taken to hospital and put on 24-hour watch for a week. While I was in there in the hospital, my parents ran their typical lies, saying I came from a good home and they didn't know why I was so crazy. I heard the nurses mocking me in the hallway, saying I'm wasting a hospital bed. If only they knew the truth. One nurse could sense it. God must have whispered to her because she showed me kindness that I'll never forget. She walked into the ward that I was in on her shift and she gave me a packet of 3 candles with hearts on them. And she said to me, no matter what, God loves me. She ministered to me. She said that Jesus loves me and God created me for a reason. And I just had to hold on to that no matter what, because even when I don't know why, I just have to hold on to his promises. Even when it doesn't make any sense, but I cannot leave because then I wouldn't be able to live through all the goodness he has in store for me. And she prayed over me, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world. No one had ever been this kind to me. Someone else's mum was a mum to me because my own mother wasn't. The blessing that came out of that hospital stay was a free pass to complete year 10 of school. Oh my gosh. I was failing, but because I was in hospital during testing, I received the year average, which was a pass. Satan saw a spark of light return in my life after that visit from that nurse, and he stole it from me. While I was in hospital, I met a guy there. He was 27. We got talking. He was 12 years older than me. When I was out of hospital, I went to visit him for a friendship and he essayed me. Around the same time, my brother would have his friends come over and drink and get stoned, and in the middle of the night, his friends would break into my room and essay me while everyone was sleeping. I told my mother about it, and she just said, boys will be boys, and I should forget about it. I begged my parents for a lock on my door, and it took them months to get one. Once again, I'd have enough of it all and decided to escape, only this time I was able to get away. I managed to get on a train and travel to a town a couple of hours away. Honestly, I was in a daze, and this time of my life is a blur. I was smoking cigarettes and weed and heavily, and I was still on that Risperdal and was experimenting with harder drugs. Emotionally, I felt dead inside. I don't remember how long I was away for, but I was living on the street and sleeping in park benches. But I had no money for menstrual products, and eventually I went back home. I was just so young and exhausted and didn't know what to do. A short while later, I met a boy online and everything changed. He was close to my age, just a little older, and he was kind to me. I would talk to him every day on the phone and go and visit him on school holidays. He lived in the same town I had grown up in early childhood, and he would hear the fighting and screams on the phone. He would hear the verbal abuse from my brother, but he would just hold space for me and say, just stay on the phone, Kayla. Just keep talking to me. He really did the best he knew how to treat me well and take care of me. He was my first love and the first man that ever showed me kindness. I had planned to finish school and then move down to be with him. I really settled at this stage of my life. Instead of sneaking out of my bedroom window to roam the streets late at night, I would stay home in my room and talk to him. I was also getting popular at school. My peers loved me because I was fun and friendly and a little bit of rebellious. I was even nominated to be school captain for the final year, and heaps of kids said that they would be voting for me, but I sabotaged it by skipping school that day when the votes were on. The teachers took my name off the vote because I wasn't there, but kids still wrote my name on the ballot paper. I honestly didn't feel worthy and had such low self-esteem. I couldn't handle the thought of actually being a school captain. I guess Satan decided life was too peaceful for me and he tried to destroy me again. This was the end of year 12. My final senior year in school was fast approaching. And one day I get home from school and my parents told me that they're leaving. They had secured government housing in another town about 4 hours away and said that they were leaving within a few weeks. So they're moving from the projects to the projects in another area. They told me I better find somewhere to live if I wanted to stay and finish my senior years and that I was on my own. I'm still the family scapegoat, remember? So they didn't really care how this was going to affect me. I ended up staying with a friend from school, sleeping on her couch for the last couple of months to finish out the school year. Unfortunately, she was living with her boyfriend, who was not a good man. He would SA me when she wasn't around, or in the middle of the night, he would assault me on the couch while I was sleeping. He told me I had to pay my way if I wanted to stay there, and my body was the only thing I had to pay with. I was so frightened and didn't know how to deal with it. My trauma response is to freeze, and I would be assaulted then, and I'd cry myself afterwards about it. I'd be essayed so many times before this, it became normal for me to have no sovereignty over my own body. I couldn't tell my friend. I felt so ashamed, and I couldn't tell my new boyfriend because he was the only good thing in my life. He was my hope that kept me alive. All this was going on while I was studying for my final exams. It was awful that my parents had just abandoned me like this. I couldn't wait for it to be over so I could run away and be with my boyfriend. When school finished, I moved in with him, and I thought, this is it. I'm starting a new life. I didn't realize that the last 18 years of abuse had warped my mind, shaped my behavior, and distorted my nervous system to a point where all that past trauma would follow me like a dark cloud hanging over my head. I spent the next 2.5 years living with that boyfriend, and to sum that time up, all I did was party. I was 18, which is the legal clubbing age for Australia, so I was going out all the time. I really got into heavy drugs at this point, like taking Molly, magic shrooms, smoking weed every single day. But I realized the drugs weren't affecting me like everybody else, and it's because I was still taking the Risperdal medication. So I weaned myself off that myself so I could enjoy life and party up a storm. Now, because I was living back in the area I grew up in now, my older sister was still living there too. And I hadn't spoken to her in years. Our relationship was still distant, but she called me up asking if I would babysit for her two daughters for her just for one night. I jumped at this because my sister hates me, remember? And the fact that she was even asking this of me, I leaped for joy at. My boyfriend and I agreed to go to her house for one night and watch the kids. We found out firsthand that the house that she was living in was riddled with demons. Her eldest daughter, so my niece, she said that she was scared to sleep in her bedroom. So I tucked her in with her younger sister in her bedroom to sleep together. So before I go any further, I just want to reiterate that my boyfriend at the time was an atheist, okay? He doesn't believe in God, he does not believe in demons, he does not believe in angels or the Bible or anything about the spirit realm for that matter. But he was about to learn firsthand. It's very real. So after we put the girls to bed, we went in and had into the bathroom and had a shower together. All of a sudden, there was a loud banging noise on the bathroom door, and the door was visibly moving like it was being hit. We thought it was the girls, but then when I opened the door, no one is there. I go and check on the girls, and they're fast asleep. You know how you can tell when children aren't because they're like trying to peep out of their eyelashes, but they were really fast asleep. So we settled in for the night and sleep on the pull-out sofa bed in the living room and turn the lights off. We heard running, not in the spirit, physical. We physically heard running footsteps next to us on the floor. You could literally hear feet running and the presence of dark evil surrounding us, not far away, like literally next to us. And we could feel hands moving up our body. It sounded like there was like 10, 15 or so of them filling this room. I was absolutely terrified and my heart was pounding. I because I've got this stupid freeze response, I conjure up the courage to whisper to my boyfriend, "Can you hear that?" In which he replied, "Yeah, don't worry about it, just get some sleep." This guy's an atheist, remember? I just imagine what's going on inside of his mind. I'm sure he just wanted to ignore the problem and pretend it wasn't happening. The next morning, we spoke about that, and he agreed that whatever that was, it was evil. So now his mind is starting to open up. Because, yes, welcome to my family. You'll figure out what evil is soon. My sister was due to come back that morning, but her phone was off and she didn't arrive. So we took the kids back to our house because we're not going to spend another night in this demon canyon again. Eventually, my sister returns my calls and comes to pick the kids up. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept the whole time. Her skin, she just looked terrible. Her skin and her hair was in a mess. It wasn't her, and she wouldn't explain where she'd been. She just palmed it off like it was no big deal that she dumped her kids for a weekend and had her phone off. I don't know. I don't want to I don't want to run anyone into the ground. That's not my intention here. I just want to state the facts. But at this point in time, I'm a regular drug user and I know what it looks like. It came to light that my sister's fiance at the time, so my niece's dad, was dealing meth and other hard drugs and would be in and out of jail his whole life. This is all public knowledge, which is why I'm openly speaking about it. Obviously, my sister would have been caught up in his antics on some level because she was with him for 13 years. The evil that surrounded this man was reflected in the demons I experienced in his home. And those demons have followed my sister's family because they haven't repented, had deliverance, and the door to Satan has been left wide open. To just give you an idea of this evil, my eldest niece has experienced sleep paralysis almost every single night of her entire life since she was a child. And it's still happening as far as I'm aware. As she got older and moved into her own home, she asked me to come into her home and do a cleansing on it. Obviously, I was in witchcraft. It's just, what are you really moving? But this, it was back when I was, yeah, involved in witchcraft and doing all of that stuff. Demons follow families until someone is brave enough to repent and accept Jesus. But many times, many times, deliverance is needed. I honestly think you should go through salvation and go through deliverance. I really think everyone should do that because it's life changing. The reason why I'm mentioning this event with babysitting my sister's children is because down the track, it becomes the catalyst of why I no longer speak to any of them. So getting back to my late teens, late teenage years, my boyfriend and I party heaps. He was a stoner and had no ambition for anything more in life. He just wanted to smoke weed and play video games. But I wanted to experience the world and do more. There was a new age shop near where we lived, and I received my first tarot and palm reading there, as opposed to I learnt the tarot myself and was just used to read on me and my friends. But I got my first tarot and palm reading there. The clairvoyant got my past spot on, and then I asked her about my boyfriend, and she said, No, you're not going to last with him. I was shocked because I really loved the guy. She told me I was going to marry a European man and travel the world. After hearing this, I lost interest in the relationship because I figured, well, we're not going to last because the clairvoyant said so. And she planted a seed in my mind, and I had no reason not to believe her. You know, this is what they do. They go into your past, right? So they get you're open now to believe, and then you start receiving things that they start planning, and they just speaking to demons. So I started going out more and more with my boyfriend, which eventually led to me cheating on him. I was really high all the time, losing track of days, and the girls I was partying with were very promiscuous. I struggled to keep a full-time job and as an assistant at an architecture and interior design firm, and had a lot of days off because of the partying. I needed my brain for my job, and I was either coming down or high, and it really interfered with my work. I felt immense amount of guilt for cheating on my boyfriend, but he forgave me and life just carried on. He was an atheist stoner, remember, and he had no depth. I couldn't he just had no depth spiritually. I mean, they believe in nothing. So I I just couldn't he just didn't have that depth spiritually to him or any passion for life, because they literally don't have hope. And it was like he wasn't really bothered, but the guilt got the better of me, and I continued to sabotage the relationship and take more drugs to suppress what I was feeling. Being so wild and out of control led to more promiscuous behavior, and I eventually realized I can't continue this anymore. I lost my job, we broke up, but I was still technically living there, and it was bad. It was a bad position to be in because I was sleeping on people's couches trying to avoid seeing my ex-boyfriend, even though I technically still lived there. It was just a bad time. I knew I couldn't stay with him any longer, and I had nowhere else to go. So I called my parents for help. I really, really didn't want to go back there. That was the last option. but I had no other option at this point. My mother said that my sister was leaving her fiance too, and she could probably give me a ride home because she was going back there with her two kids. So, this next chapter is where things get really, really dark for me, and I spiral right out of control. My parents were living in a new home that I haven't lived in before, but it was filled with furniture that held the memories of my traumatic childhood, and it was very triggering. My parents hadn't changed either. My father was the same old stubborn man he'd always been. My younger brother was there. He hadn't left the nest yet. And my mother was happy that her home was full again, especially with the grandchildren from her favorite daughter being there. To set the scene, it's a tiny 4-bedroom government house in the projects of a small country town with a rundown caravan out the back for me to stay in. Immediately upon living there, the abuse began again. The dynamic was different this time, having my sister and her kids there. Every time things got heated to a point of physical violence with my father, my sister would step in and yell, "Not in front of my kids," because she had just left a domestic violent relationship and she didn't want her kids seeing it. But that didn't stop my younger brother. He grew up to be a self entitled adult and couldn't control his emotions. He studied fashion and sewing and was into same sex relationships. He would have these tantrums and emotional outbursts, and then he would hit me in front of the children. I remember that they were so scared at times. Now, remember, my mother was a master manipulator and gossiped to all her children behind their backs. She instigated and got my whole family to mock me and verbally abuse me, telling me that I was worthless and no good, that I made a mistake leaving my ex boyfriend because he was a good man and treated me so well, even though that just meant he wasn't violent with me. I was ridiculed for coming off the medication and constantly told how much of a horrible person I am for cheating on a good man. I was told that I ruined everything and that it was my whole family ganging up on me this time. The guilt, the shame, and diminished self worth became overwhelming. I was at a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. I turned to drugs again to mask the pain. I made friends with some local people and hit the party scene harder than ever before. To sum up the next few years, my friends were into hard drugs, shooting up, stealing, and we'd drive around high and drunk just looking for fun. I was taking speed, acid, weed, ketamine, molly, and mixing it all. The only thing I didn't do was heroin. That's the only drug I didn't do. Everything else, it was on the table. I would go days on end without sleeping. I tried to get some jobs, but I couldn't hold them down. I spent a lot of time sitting at my work desk just crying. My body became anyone's who wanted it. There were a few times I said no to men, but they just overpowered me and did what they wanted anyway. Because of my past with men, I developed a terrible relationship with sex and often used my body to get what I needed, whether it was drugs, drinks, or just somewhere to sleep, because I didn't want to go home to my family. I started hanging out with all the wrong people and got into a lot of trouble. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I just wanted to feel good and be happy and accepted and find a place of belonging. And I thought if I had sex with men, they would love me. But in truth, it didn't obviously work out that way. So here's a couple of significant details of that time period. My sister and I did get a little closer and she partied with me a little bit. She admitted to me that she had a long history with drugs during her previous relationship with a kid's dad. I went to see a psychiatrist to get help because the depression just gets worse. The therapist I spoke to about my life story up until this point literally said he didn't think anything was wrong with me, but rather that I was a product of an extremely toxic and abusive environment, which was a relief to hear that, except I'm still in that toxic, abusive environment because I have nowhere else to live. But he prescribed me some Seroquel instead of smoking weed. I still didn't understand this prophetic gift or why I was here on this planet. The gift was annoying me because I knew so much about people, but when I spoke the truth, it would get me into a lot of trouble. So this gift felt like it was a curse, and the more I took drugs to try and block it out, it didn't always work. It's still there. It's a part of you. It's God literally gave me that. It's not going anywhere. So I was still enchanted with the occult at this time. I did an Ouija board. This is pretty creepy. I did an Ouija board with some girlfriends, and the board literally spelt out, "Don't trust them." And then the planchet, which is the little dial, it literally flew off the table, and the candles we had around us burning all spilled wax over the other three girls and burned them, except for me. Like demons are literally just talking to me. The other girls freaked out about this, and it turns out I couldn't trust any of them. So I ended up trusting, obviously, the spirit realm more than I trusted people at this point. I ended up dating a man for a short while. Oh boy, who was a gang member and wanted in two separate countries. I'm not dropping the name of the gang, but they're very well known worldwide and they're bad people. I started rolling heavy with him. He was a true sociopath and saw a broken girl in me that he could easily manipulate. He would bash people and rob them, do anything to survive. We ended up living on the streets of Sydney for a while together. I still thought all of this was better than going back home. I made friends with the other homeless people and felt a sense of belonging and community. We'd all look out for each other in the homeless community. They're very much like that. They all take care of each other. And it was beautiful. Honestly, like that part of it was really beautiful, but it's hard living on the streets as a girl. I didn't sleep and I would wash my underwear in the public toilet sinks because I couldn't afford sanitary items. It was the middle of winter and I got over sleeping in the freezing cold under bridges and just decided to go back home. But I'll bring this boyfriend with me. He met my mother, who literally thought he was a nice young man. And the fact that he was affiliated to this particular gang, she liked the idea of. Perhaps because they're connected to her father, who was a Freemason. That's all I'm going to say about that gang. He ended up getting arrested and I never saw him again. My father was then diagnosed with bowel cancer. He had surgery for it and everything seemed okay and he was sent home. A few days later, I came home from work with a feeling that something isn't okay. I found my mother in the kitchen dishing up dinner. It was just really weird. She was acting very strange. I went and found my father in the bedroom and he was vomiting black and looked terrible. I called out to my mother to ring the ambulance and she was completely disassociated like she always is. She was avoiding the fact that my father looked like he was dying in that room and displayed the same behavior I'd seen all my life, just pretending things were fine when they weren't. I forced my mother to call an ambulance and they took him to the nearest major hospital. There was already a hospital in this town, but because of his circumstances, he needed to go to a major hospital, which was an hour away. I was the only one who followed the ambulance there. I spent the night in the hospital with my father. The nurses were pretty sure he was going to die and told me to prepare for that. I sat next to him in the hospital room that night and I laid hands on my dad, bawling my eyes out, praying to God to save him. I hadn't prayed to God in such a long time, and I was at his mercy, and God showed me a vision of my dad. He showed me that he had a good heart. He just didn't know how to handle his emotions. He just poured so much clarity and grace and understanding into me about my dad. The Lord showed me that he had a bad childhood and an abusive father as well, and it skewed his beliefs about life. This was a huge, huge moment for me because all my life I was praying to God to take my father away. I wanted him dead because of all the hurt and pain he'd caused me. And now he's here dying in this hospital bed. He's actually dying. And all I kept praying for and begging the Lord not to take my father away, please. I poured my whole heart and soul into prayer, interceding heavy for my dad. I was just bawling my eyes out, begging God, like, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I repented. I forgave my father for all of the abuse in one powerful moment. And I just kept repenting to the Lord, like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. All of a sudden, my dad wakes up and looks over at me, and I'm in utter shock. Like, he literally just came to. I tell him what just happened, and we share this special moment together just in the presence of God's mercy. With every attack of the enemy, our Lord is always working in the background to redeem us and to restore our relationship with Him. But so many times we get caught up in our own way and don't learn His character or have faith in His perfect plan for us. This was another moment where God's hand moved in my life, but the whole experience was so overwhelming to feel the presence of God like that. Like, I still didn't understand it. I don't even have the words for that. I just didn't know how to process it all. I ended up leaving the hospital and going to get high because I was a mess from this whole experience. I wish I could tell you that this was a beautiful come to Jesus moment for me through the power of intercession and that wraps up my salvation, but the story doesn't end here. I became friends with a woman who was dealing a variety of hard drugs, and she was knocking around with some notorious gang members and gangs. I got pulled into that scene next because I struggled to hold down a job and this lifestyle seemed so easy. I would deliver things to people because I had a car by this stage, and the people I was hanging around were always offering me drugs and partying. I got to know some of the gang members and would drink and party at the clubhouse with them. My prophetic gift has always been very good at knowing things about people, events, and would unfold. And so I became a valuable asset to them because I could give them the heads up about certain events or when a raid was going to happen. At first, they thought I was an undercover cop. Uh, but then they just realized this is me. It's all part of my personality. I explained that I have this gift and I was born with it. And I proved it by sitting in a room with them all and literally telling them things about their life that I could not have possibly known. I have a naturally bubbly character, so I find it easy to make friends and I just know how to handle myself and talk and serve anyone in all walks of life. So I wasn't promiscuous with any of them because I knew I could get in a lot of serious trouble if I went down that road. I was well liked by the members and felt comfortable around them, and that was my downfall. I got complacent with them because I felt safe and very protected by them, and I let my guard down and I forgot about how bad some of these men really are. They were also the type of guys that owned whatever they wanted and could have whatever they wanted. One day I had to deliver something to a different clubhouse. Oh boy. One day I had to deliver something to a different clubhouse, one that I had only been to a couple of times, and I didn't really know the guys there that well. They offered me a can of Sprite, and by the time I finished it, I knew something was very wrong. I started to feel dizzy and out of it and don't really remember much after that. Things were a bit of a blur. They drugged me and essayed me for hours, taking turns, having their way. I had moments of coming to naked in different rooms of this clubhouse. Then I'd pass out again. It must have gone on all day and all night. And for the most part, I don't remember much. But what I do remember is coming to in the morning naked, grabbing my belongings, getting dressed, walking out of there. I turned to a few of them that were in my way and told them to drug me harder next time because I didn't want to remember their filthy faces. Then I stormed out of there. They looked at me with disbelief. They did that to me simply because they could. I was foolish enough to put myself into that position. But the reality is that my whole life leading up to that point put me there. With all the abuse I'd suffered from virtually every single man I'd ever known, I was a statistic destined for that ending. To tell you it broke me is an understatement. I felt so dirty, so used, and so ashamed. I showered for a long time, scrubbing my body, but never feeling clean. I went to a friend's house. They were addicts. They used needles. And they took one look at me and knew something terrible had happened. I shut up for the first time that day and it did nothing. I literally shut up for the first time and I wasn't even high from it because I was so emotionally numb and dead inside. I chose not to report that, by the way, or tell anyone what had happened until literally this moment right now. But these were evil These were evil men and they were dangerous men, and I was foolish enough to put myself into that position. I know that I was way in over my head at this point and I really just needed to get out. I started looking into manifesting our desires, which is a form of witchcraft, but it's huge in the New Age movement. I used it to manifest living on an island resort, and lo and behold, I end up getting hired for a full time live in position on an island resort for a hotel management role. And that is when I headed north to the state of Queensland. I'm 24 at this point and catching a boat from the mainland to this island resort for the first time, not knowing what to expect. But because I had manifested this via witchcraft, I thought this was exactly where I was meant to be. And I was in a state of magical thinking, which basically means I was looking for signs to affirm my choices, drawing from sheer desperation. So that's another hook that Satan will use, your desperate affairs, luring you down into a path that you're not meant to go down. So on this island, you'd leave your car parked at the dock on the mainland and then take a boat ride over. The place is absolutely beautiful with white sandy beaches and crystal clear water and wild dolphins. I was so captivated by the beauty of all of this and I thought, this is it. This is it. I've made it. Everything up until this point now makes sense and I'm meant to be here. I get talking to a guy. It's always a guy. I get talking to a guy on the boat that was catching the same boat as me, and it's his first day too. I thought to myself, this is a sign. I'm meant to be here and I'm meant to meet this guy. But then I felt an overwhelming conviction to stay away from this man from the Holy Spirit. I literally remember the very moment that the voice of the Lord told me to not get involved with this man. Can you guess what I did next? I was so conflicting between what I was feeling from the Lord and what I was thinking about manifesting this job and this guy being a sign. Like, this was it. But as usual, I didn't understand this prophetic gift of mine and I chose to ignore it. I dated this guy on and off. Here's a box of red flags. Don't touch it. I touched it. I went and dated that man for 2 years on and off. It was such a toxic relationship and it ended up being a soul tie. Being abused physically and verbally was the only form of love I knew of. So when he did it to me, it felt familiar. When he abused me, that's literally, it's sad, but that's literally the only love I know. He was a weed dealer and had a drug induced psychosis problem. And I was a very broken and traumatized girl with daddy issues who just wanted someone to love me. And this was a recipe for disaster. I was so desperate to make this work with him because I had moved my whole life to start fresh. He was very, very addicted to dark porn. He had an addiction to it and he was into some seriously twisted and scary fetishes. It makes BDSM look amateur. Let's put it that way. I literally agreed and went along with anything he wanted to do and explore when it came to sex. I thought I loved this man. I thought it was all meant to be. And I was willing to give this everything because I couldn't go back to my old life. So I believed that this had to work. Otherwise, it was the end of me. Every time we would break up, I'd take an extra step deeper into the demonic to fulfill another fetish of his, which would result in us getting back together. By this point, I had crippling anxiety, but my depression was masked by the fact that I could swim with dolphins and was living on a beautiful island. This guy was filled with the spirit of perversion and lusted over men and women. I never, ever felt secure in this relationship, which fed more into my own insecurities. By this point, I'm 12 months into living here and in this relationship. So this guy was into a fetish called cuckold, which is basically a cheating partner. That's literally what he was into. He thought that it would be hot to watch me have sex with someone else in front of him. He also had bisexual tendencies, but had never experienced that and felt safe to do so with me. But because we lived on an island and wanted to keep things under wraps, we landed on this idea that we could just find someone on the mainland and then we could get a hotel room together and make it happen. So I go ahead and found a guy. Oh my gosh. A guy of Craigslist, after putting an ad up about it, for all of us to meet up in a hotel room with this random dude off the internet to have a threesome. I didn't want to do any of this, but if you remember, I was determined to make this work. And I'm very determined when I want to make something work. And I just was trying to look at the positive out of it, honestly, because the deeper into these fetishes I'd agree to go, the more that this boyfriend would show love and affection to me. It was an addiction, and it's a soul tie as well, and it's like that, and it becomes an idol. Every time I would fulfill these fetishes, he'd stop flirting with other people and stop cheating on me. So it was just really toxic. I was pretty drunk and high at this point, so we're in this hotel room because I didn't want to be sober doing this. After this guy leaves, we end up in a terrible argument. I leave in my car, bawling my eyes out. I'm still drunk and high, and I don't know where to go. I'm just driving around Brisbane City in my underwear. Then the police pull me over and I just break down. You've got to be kidding me, right? At this point, I'm having an actual nervous breakdown, bawling my eyes out. Call it an act of God, or maybe it was the fact that he just didn't know what to do with a woman sitting in her underwear in a car, bawling her eyes out in the middle of the night. But this police officer really should have booked me for a DUI. He took my breath sample and I knew I'd blown over. I knew, because I had consumed a bottle of champagne and half a bottle of vodka just before getting into this car. But instead, he just asked if I was okay. He noticed I had old number plates on my car and saw the new ones sitting on my back seat. And he proceeded to change them over for me and then sent me on my way. As any toxic relationship goes, we'd break up, get back together, break up, get back together. The fights would be so violent and so abusive. So many of the things would be all of my so many of my things would be broken and smashed, and I was so embarrassed about it. I just smile and pretend everything was okay. If anyone ever heard the fight or whatever, like one time he threw a pedestal fan at me, and obviously the fan broke, and I know my neighbor heard it upstairs. How could you not? And I was taking the pedestal fan to the bin, and he was like, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, just get into an argument." Like I literally just pretended everything was all okay because I was so embarrassed about it. I just smile, pretend it's fine to anybody that heard anything. But one night we were out for dinner and drinks on the mainland together. We were with a couple of friends from the island. My boyfriend had taken some coke, MDMA, and drank that night. He didn't handle his drugs very well because he already had drug induced psychosis, and he started to freak out and abuse me at the restaurant. So I excused myself and left with him to walk back to our hotel. He starts punching me and then pushing me onto the street. Domestic violence is something I'm used to, and that didn't bother me, which is sad. But I'm more concerned about somebody seeing this happen. That's all I'm actually concerned about. So I'm trying to calm him down as we are walking, but he's in a fit of rage, taking it out on me. Next thing, I saw a group of boys across the road, and I'm telling my boyfriend to please calm down because I didn't want them to get involved. They see what's going on and they spotted the situation. They cross the road, and I'm thinking, gosh, here we go. And they ask me if I'm okay, which I'm clearly not. But I try to smooth things over and say, yeah, it's fine. They could tell what was happening. So two of these guys said they're going to escort my boyfriend back to the hotel room to grab his stuff to leave. I am so embarrassed at this point as I'm standing out the front of the hotel with the three other dudes. One of them starts prophesying to me and says, "You're in a bad situation, and you know you're in a bad situation. I'm not going to tell you to leave him because you already know you should. You're going to continue to go back and forth with him for more years until there is nothing left of you." Wow. I was in shock. I needed to hear that. He was absolutely right. I really wish the rest of that night went smoothly, but unfortunately it didn't. So those boys had left, and I thought my boyfriend did too. So I went back into the hotel room. A few hours later, my boyfriend came back banging on the hotel room door, and I am terrified at this point. that he is going to kill me. So I hide in the room, and the only person I know to call who's been in a DV relationship is my sister. So I call her at 3 a.m. crying, telling her, I'm sorry it's so late, but I don't know what to do. I think he's literally going to kill me. I don't know whether to call the police or just let him in and try and smooth it over. She said just let him in and agree with him about everything and just to smooth things over. So I do, but instead he came back in a fit of rage and it was so bad. This hotel room got absolutely torn up. We get into a terrible domestic fight. I get thrown across the hotel room. My phone is smashed. It's just bad, you guys. The things just get so crazy until he finally passes out. We make up again and we go back into the typical domestic violent relationship loop of breaking up, getting back together, and patching things up again. He just beat me down so much that I developed a trauma bond with him. I desperately wanted his love and this relationship to work more than ever. But the reality is that I really wanted my father's love, and this relationship was just a reflection of that. I really wanted to see my parents again, so I paid for them to stay on the island for a 3-day all expenses paid for trip. I paid for their flights and everything. It was a long time since I'd seen them, and although I really wanted to see them again, I'm sure a part of me wanted to show them how successful I'd turned out to. They loved it, and it was probably the best memory I've ever had with both of them because it was just us, no other siblings on the island resort. They had no idea that this was what was really going on behind the scenes with my boyfriend. My boyfriend comes up with another idea um to because I wanted his love so badly. He wanted me to work at a brothel on the mainland on my days off and take photos to fulfill his fetish. I figured a brothel would place me in more control than meeting randoms from the internet to sleep with. So we agreed, and before taking a booking with a client, I'd let him know, and then also let him know when it was finished. Brothels, mind you, are completely illegal in parts of Australia, and many of them are like parlors. So I look up the most exclusive one I could find, which was a parlor, and I head in for an interview, which I honestly didn't know what to expect. I worked there as a prostitute in a brothel for 3 months. To tell you I was exhausted is an understatement. I had a full time job working in reception of a busy island resort. Then on the weekends, I'd take the boat to the mainland, drive my car to the brothel, and stay awake for the entire weekend without any sleep, just having sex with clients that booked me the entire time. I'd make bulk cash and I couldn't keep up with shoving it into the glove box of my car. I would give most of my earnings to my boyfriend because he told me that part of the deal was that I was working there to please him so he should get the money. I would spend some of it buying lavish things for us. For a girl who grew up in the projects and had no money all her life, it felt good to be able to buy what I wanted, but it cost me my soul. Mine and this ex-boyfriend's relationship was the best it had ever been at this point, but I was also a broken shell of a woman at this point too. I literally felt like I was selling my soul just so my boyfriend would love me. I became good friends with the girls at the brothel. They tend to take care of each other in a situation like that. We all came from similar background of childhood trauma, and betrayal. All of us felt like prostitution was a form of regaining some kind of control back in our lives. We were earning money for something that used to be taken from us by men, but the truth is that it's a false sense of security. Around this time, I end up buying some more witchcraft, New Age, and Buddhist books to read between bookings. One was written by the Dalai Lama and another by Louise Hay, who is the New Age pioneer of positive affirmations. I also bought a book about angels from Doreen Virtue, which some of you do. Let me know in the comments if you know who Doreen Virtue is. He was literally a pioneer in the New Age movement. She made up angel cards, angel numbers. She did a lot. She's now a Christian. But anyway, I was reading her books in a brothel. I still use tarot cards and astrology at this point, but I'd use it more for gauging someone's personality more than anything. Everything about my life at this point was drenched in demonic darkness, and I was drowning in it. Some of the other girls, because you got to understand, like when you work in a place like that, um, they're very like they have street skills and they're aware of things. So some of the other girls at the brothel had husbands or boyfriends who didn't know. Oh, I could do a whole episode on on revealing what goes on inside brothels. My goodness. So some of the other girls at the brothel had husbands and boyfriends that they didn't know what they were doing for work. They hid it from them, right? They say they were working in a casino. One girl said she was the duty manager there. One other girl said she was the cleaner at a brothel, but she didn't work there as one of the working girls. But because my relationship with was just so abusive with this guy, the other girls there started to pick up on the signs of it. Okay, they'd lived through it all, that they knew what to look for, and it was probably written all over me when we were having a fight. He would blow up my phone. It wasn't a normal like just 40 missed calls. It was like constantly. He was constantly hitting the redial button. Like it was just chaotic, really obsessive, chaotic. I opened up to the girls a little bit at this point about what was happening, and they agreed that it is really bad when you've got when you've got a bunch of prostitutes in a brothel looking at you, telling you, wow, that's bad. It's bad. Okay. So one of the girls said that I could come and live with her. So she had a whole house to herself and we could work together at the brothel full time. And this would be a good way to leave him and transition back to the mainland. Because you got to think, I'm living on a remote island at this time with this. It's just terrible, terrible situation with this DV relationship and taking the boat to work at this brothel on the mainland. Like, it's crazy, crazy situation to be in. I didn't look forward to the idea of doing this with her, but it's fast cash and I knew that it would be an easy option. I did look at other alternatives too. Like I literally applied for other roles in admin back on the mainland in a normal white collar job, in an office and everything. But going in for interviews and doing this whole old deal was really difficult when you're living on an island and just everything else going on. So my boyfriend and I, by this time, are extremely toxic. Like, ugh, crazy toxic. Okay. I knew he was cheating on me and who he was with because of this gift of prophecy. Okay. So it was honestly driving me insane because I was being so gaslit by him denying it. Like, I'll give you an example. One night when he was at this one particular place, he wasn't at his house. I walked to this house on the island, which I felt so led to walk into this house, this one random house. Okay, I had a feeling he would be in there. I literally walked to the front door, but before I, because most people on the island they don't lock their doors or anything because it's I don't know, everyone just knows everyone there. Like where you gonna go? There's only one boat out of it. So I get to the front door of this particular house and I decided, don't go in there. Just go back to your room. So I go back to my room. Whatever. The following, because I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? I'm literally walking into somebody's random house. The following day, one of my friends said that she needed to come and see me and tell me something, which was that my boyfriend was at that house. She lived there in that house. So my boyfriend was in her house last night, that house that I went to the front door of, sleeping with her roommate. That was the very house I literally walked up to the front door of. He was sleeping with other people on the island, including the woman in HR who had all the keys to every room in the staff quarters. Every time my boyfriend and I would break up, he would get a key from her and get into my room and absolutely trash it. I'm talking like literally break all my things, tear up my clothes, pour like empty washing powder all over the floor. Like I'm talking absolutely trashed it. Okay. So this toxic cycle continues of us being off again and on again, off again, on again. And the interesting thing about this man though is like he's really charismatic. Like this is terrible to compare someone to Ted Bundy, but do you know how like Ted Bundy has like this charismatic, puts on a really good facade, but like literally doing the worst things behind closed doors? He was like that, like a sociopath. Like it was just terrible. So people tend to believe the first word that they hear as well, which is bad, but people tend to do that. And so I just kept my mouth shut. I was embarrassed and so ashamed. And so obviously when he would say bad things about me, people just didn't start to like me so much on this island because he's talking trash about me. And so anyway, I decided to keep trying to make this relationship work. So there was a guy on the island who was a carpenter, and that okay, so he was doing some contract work on some of the houses on the island, and I noticed him as I was walking to my reception job one day, and as I turn around, he's looking back at me. Anyway, we get talking later at the bar on the island that night, and I tell my boyfriend about it. My boyfriend thinks it would be oh my gosh. My boyfriend thinks it would be a good idea if he literally hides in the wardrobe in my room while I bring this guy back to my place so my boyfriend can secretly watch us have sex together with this dude. I stupidly agree, as always, and go down to the bar that night to meet up with this guy. Oh my goodness, you guys. My boyfriend hangs out at mine smoking weed, and the idea was that I'd text him when we were coming back, to give him the heads up to go and hide. I have a few drinks at the bar on the island. Me and this guy get to talking. We both really like each other, and he's not your typical dude that just wanted to have a one night stand. So I literally kept telling him just to come up to my room. Come up, just come up. Just like I don't want to talk. Just let's go because I just want to get it over and done with, right? And he said he didn't want to do that and that he wanted to take me out on a date on the mainland. And I told him like I'm not that type of girl. Like you've got no idea, buddy. And he just was a really sweet gentleman and told me that he could see something very special inside of me and wanted to get to know me for me. I wanted to cry then and there. And he asked me what's wrong. And I said, if I tell you, you're never, literally never going to believe it. Okay, like, oh, he says, "Yes, I will, try me." I said, "No, like, I'm serious, dude. You've got no idea. I genuinely do not think you're going to be able to handle it, okay? Because I can't even handle it. How are you gonna handle it? And I'm the one living it." So you have to remember at this point in time, nobody else knew what was really happening behind closed doors in my life. I'm literally living a double life. So obviously the girls at the brothel knew, yeah, but I kept all of this locked inside me. And in that moment, with this man just sitting next to me and holding space, I told him, I just told him, I literally told him, I said, what I'm about to tell you, you cannot tell anyone. And I really mean it. I will give you some trust, but you have to have my back and not tell a soul. He agrees. I say, okay, this is my life. I am dating a narcissistic man in a DV relationship, and to appease him to love me and stop abusing me and to stop cheating on me, I decided to work at a brothel on the mainland on my days off. His face was absolutely mortified. This nice guy. He literally was like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, that's not even the half of it." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, right now," oh my goodness. I said, "Right now, he's waiting for me in my bedroom to bring you back there to sleep with you in front of him while he hides in the wardrobe." This guy, this nice guy, was absolutely mortified, and I'm having second thoughts about telling him. So I said, I knew I shouldn't have told you. I literally said you wouldn't be able to handle it." He said to me, "I just can't believe you're doing all of this. You don't deserve to be treated like that. You're beautiful and you have a good heart, and you're allowing yourself to be abused just so someone would love you, and it's sad. So here's what we're going to do instead." I was like, "Okay, sir, I'm all ears. We're not going to go back to that room. We're going to go to the penthouse instead, and we're going to spend the night together in the pool and have some fun." We did, and it was honestly so refreshing. I just swam in this pool in my clothes, and it was just so fun. He didn't want anything from me. He didn't try to sleep with me. He just wanted to get to know me. Um, it was nice. Anyway, after that night, I went back to my room to this stupid boyfriend, and I tell him what happened. Okay, so we had a fight and we broke up again. Only this time, I decided to take the new guy up on his offer and go on a date with him. The new guy, the carpenter, he arranged a home cooked meal back at his place on the mainland. So he picked me up from the dog. He was honestly a true gentleman. It was beautiful. We got along so well, and he was a really nice guy. But I felt also like he was such a nice guy. I come from such a colorful past. I felt like he was a little bit immature. Like, don't get me wrong, the guy's a nice guy, but he was a little bit immature. Like, what I thought was funny, he didn't find funny, and he just kind of lacked that depth. Like, it was very surface level. Look at me. Like, I have depth about me. I need that in a relationship, especially in a intimate relationship, right? And I really was searching for that in someone. And we didn't really have much in common at all. Honestly, he really liked me, but I just didn't feel like we were evenly yoked, in so many ways. Conversations were just more surface level, and I was bored with the lack of intellectual stimulation. He's a good guy. I honestly pray that he finds a good woman and just, but yeah, it wasn't for me. It wasn't meant to be. So I call things off with him, but he was the stepping stone that I truly needed to help me. There's always a stepping stone guy. Girls, have you ever realized that? There's always a stepping stone guy. So he was the stepping stone guy that I needed to help me to wake up and realize there are good guys out there, and I don't deserve to be anyone's punching bag any longer. So the whole relationship with my ex was a nightmare, and I knew I needed to get away. But having a soul tie is like you're chained to someone, and it becomes so over consuming, and like you want to get away but you can't. It's horrible. It's a really horrible feeling. And have you guys ever experienced a soul tie? And your whole life revolves around them because they become an idol. He was still breaking into my room and trashing it at this stage. I never told anyone what was really happening, literally until now. And people tend to believe the first word, that they hear first, especially when it comes to gossip. And although my now ex-boyfriend on the island was a bad dude, he had that sort of charismatic side to him, and people would fall for it. So he started telling people on the island that I work as a prostitute, and he dragged my name through the mud to make himself appear to be the victim. It was the same behavioral traits of any narcissist. I was so ashamed of where my life was, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't try and back up, like, whatever. Go hear it again. I don't care at this point. Another friend I had on the island hated my boyfriend, and she could see through him. She worked in the little beauty hut that was there. She said I needed to find another man, so she put the dating app, Plenty of Fish. I don't even know if this dating app is around anymore. Does anyone remember this dating app? Plenty of Fish on my phone, and said I should get on there and meet one. She set up the profile and everything. And I was reluctant at this point, but at this point of my life, why not? Right? So I remember actually the clairvoyant at this point, all those years ago, said that I'd travel and meet a European man. And I was over the men in Australia at this point, and I was also over the fact that most of them are short, which is actually a fact. Most of them are quite short. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm a tall girly. My family are all on my come from Denmark. Like, I'm a tall girl, right? 6 foot tall. So I decided to Google where the tallest men in the world live, because I'm sick. This is like it's rare, okay, to find a decent man, let alone height. And it was the Netherlands, which fit perfectly with my weed habit. And I applied for a passport, and I decide I'm going to leave on a one-way flight and not come back. And at this point, my ex-boyfriend and I are fighting so bad. So he's an ex at that point, okay? And we're just fighting so bad. He can sense that emotionally I'm becoming more and more distant from him. So one night, on a concoction of Valium and weed, I sit on my balcony of my apartment on the island, and I start praying to God. As you do in these moments. Hello. I prayed. I know it's been a while, and I doubt that you're going to want to talk to me now, but I need your help, and I don't know what to do. I want to die, God. I don't want to be here anymore. I am so deep into this. I don't know how to get out of it. I don't want to work as a prostitute, but I don't have any option right now. I just want to be happy, but I'm tired. I'm tired. I haven't even had a good life. I want one. I'm tired of this life. I'm tired of people being hurt. I'm tired of people constantly hurting me. I'm tired of giving my heart and all I get in return is abused. I need you to tell me, do I go? Do I move in with my friend at the brothel? Do I just try and make this relationship work again? Do I go overseas never to return, or do I just end it all because I can't keep doing this? I'm tired, God, and I need your help. And he answered me and he told me it was neither of those options and to just wait on him. Well, that annoyed me because how does that even make any sense? And I thought, this is why I don't talk to you, because I pray and I feel like you're messing with me all the time. Anyway, so the next morning, I start a later shift on the island this day, and I had a feeling to just jump on this silly dating app that my friend set up for me. All I knew is I wanted a man that looked like a man. You know how it is, ladies. I wanted a man that looked like a man that could protect me and keep me safe. That's it. That's all I want. That's it. Anything more than that, I would be grateful for, but that's all I wanted. The bar is set pretty low. I am scrolling and I see this man covered in tattoos, all up his neck and his arms with a shaved head with big muscles. And I thought, wow, he looks like a bad dude. Just my cup of tea. Oh, so I sent him a message. I didn't think, oh, he's a bad dude, I'm going to send him a message. But at this time, through the eyes of trauma, he's my type of guy. So I sent him a message, and all I said was, wow, cool ink. He messaged me back, and we got talking. Something I first noticed about this man, and I've been hanging around gangs and bad dudes like my whole life, right? But this guy wrote in full sentences with grammar and punctuation and was really well spoken, which didn't match at all the skinhead look he had going for him with covered in tattoos. So I instantly realized there was more to this man than meets the eye, and my curious nature wanted to find out more. So let me know in the comments if you know who this man might be. Some of you have actually spoken to him too. So we exchanged numbers and start talking on the phone. We spoke every single night for hours on end. This man had depth. He had depth. He was patient. He listened. I could literally have DMs with this man about anything. We talked for 2 weeks on the phone every night. Like, I'm talking like sometimes on the phone, we were on the phone for like 8 hours. Like, we talked and talked and talked. We never ran out of anything to talk about. He worked away in the mines on a month. Beth's got it. Skylar's got it. He worked away in the mines on a month, 1 month on, 1 week off roster. But he was taking some more time off on his break to do a snowboarding trip to Canada with his friends. So on his week off, we agreed to meet up because he wanted to take me out on a date. Because he worked away and I lived on an island, we decided to get a hotel room for the night to make things easier. I was so excited for this. He made a booking at Sofitel, which is a beautiful French hotel. Like, literally, when you go to check in, they say bonjour. It's very fancy. And so he made a booking in at Sofitel in one of their premium suites. We had a big spa and a spacious room. It was absolutely gorgeous. So upon arrival, all right, so I get there, I get to the hotel, I check into this room, because he said to do this, like, you just need to check in and he'll be catching a flight over and he'll be there in a few hours time. So I had a few hours in this room to just like chill out for a bit. So upon arrival, I placed my bags down and I saw a big bouquet of roses with these little diamonds in the middle of them, just this big bouquet and a bottle of champagne. I am absolutely taken back. This room is absolutely stunning. This was another moment where the hand of God really moved in my life. All of a sudden, I felt the palpable presence of God Himself in this room. I was bawling my eyes out just all of a sudden, okay? And I drop to my knees because every knee shall bow. I didn't know, like, my body just sort of took over. I couldn't get up. It was like the weight of God's glory was just so much. I was absolutely overwhelmed with his love just pouring into me. And then the Lord spoke and he said, "You're safe now. I have heard your prayers, daughter." And this is him. I cannot even begin to describe to you how absolutely overwhelmed I was in this moment. My spirit knew exactly who that was. But my mind was trying to rationalize it. I knew that was the Lord. I know who that is. But there was so many mixed emotions in that, from the years of trauma and abuse, crying out to the Lord, thinking my prayers were not being heard, thinking he was punishing me. There was a lot to unpack. But in that moment, I just couldn't I didn't feel worthy as well on top of it. I knew in that moment that the glory of the Lord and my life was about to change for the better in meeting Ivica. I wanted to get in my car and drive out of there. I was honestly like really overwhelmed. I'm still overwhelmed now talking about 12 years later. Like in the moment, I was a blubbering mess. I didn't understand. There was what was happening. Like my spirit knew, but my head was like, "What is happening? Why are you crying? Stop it!" It was just really overwhelming. So instead, I do what I do best at that point in time, and I went and I got a bottle of tequila. I thought it would be nice for us to take shots together when he arrived. So lovely of me. So hospitable. But I needed to calm the nerves too. So across the road was a really beautiful fine dining restaurant. And I asked the bar staff if they wouldn't mind cutting. I had a lemon actually. And I asked if they wouldn't mind cutting it up for me. And I got to talking to them and I was so nervous. I was like, I'm really nervous. I'm meeting this guy and he's taking me on a date. I'm not really sure where. Anyway, so time had passed, a couple of hours, and Ivica had arrived at the hotel, and we just talked for hours and hours and lost track of time. Everything he was like, because it's when you meet people off the internet, like, you never really know, right? But he is literally, it's so rare. He is literally who he says he is. He is who he is behind closed doors to you. Like he just is a man of integrity even before he had Jesus in his life, like very special. And it was just one of the most beautiful moments I will forever cherish in meeting him. So when we were leaving the hotel to go out on the date that he had organized at this fancy restaurant, I noticed that there was a part, just these little things that God, oh, you know what it's like, saints, when God sends you signs and you just know it's him. And you're just like, sometimes you chuckle to yourself or it brings you to tears, but you know what it's like. Anyway, so we're leaving to go out on this date, and I noticed there was a pile of white feathers on the ground, which made me chuckle to myself. It was like an angel from the Lord was with us, and I knew that God has a funny sense of humor like this, and it just made me laugh. We get to the restaurant, and it just so happens to be the one across the road that I asked them to cut up my lemons for me. So upon arrival, a few of the staff had waved to me and they greeted me and they were so excited for me. It was so cute. They were so excited because this was the date I was telling them about. I was so excited. It was so funny. So this place was absolutely stunning. It was funny because to see Vitz's reaction, he was like, "What's going on? How do you know these people?" I'll tell you later. So anyway, we go and sit down and I am immediately overwhelmed. I don't feel worthy of this at all. Ivica tells me to choose anything off the menu and that he's going to be ordering. He's a man, okay? So he's going to be ordering this, and he's been out in the mines for 4 weeks. So he wants to spend his money well on a good piece of steak. But this steak was $100. It's a VIP steak. It's my gosh, this steak, this cow lives the life. They like literally massage it, like play classical music to the cows. Like it's some cow from Japan. Like it's very special, but it's $100 VIP steak. Everything off this menu, because it's fine dining, you see, everything off this menu is so expensive and fancy. And I just chose the cheapest thing, which was a side salad. And he notices straight away what's happening. He picks up on things. So I told him, please, like, I literally was begging him, like, please, can we leave? Can we just go to a bar and I'll pay for a meal for us? I'm literally like, I remember there was these pretty lights on the roof, and I'm trying to look at them so that I don't burst into tears of crying. And he could tell, he could see that. And he just held my hands and looked me at in the eyes and said, "I've been wanting to try this steak for ages. I would be having this regardless of whether you're here or not." He just, do you know what I mean? He just knows how to calm somebody down, and he took the pressure off it. He just knows exactly what to say. So he ended up ordering for me. There was so much gourmet food on the table. I'd never seen anything like it. Ivica is Croatian and they love their food. It's part of his culture. So I wasn't looking forward to going back to the island. And I told him that. I told him everything. I literally told him everything. This one date turned into a whole week together. A whole week together. I was only meant to go for one night. I never went back to the brothel after meeting Ivica. To this day, my things are still in the locker there as far as I know. After a life-changing week together, Ivica had left to go to his snowboarding trip in Canada, and I went back to the island. I wasn't exactly sure how things were going to play out, but I was carrying a big bouquet of roses off the boat, and my ex was one of the porters. So he obviously knew what was happening. I'd also been missing for a whole week, like literally. So So things got a lot worse before they got better at this point. So I'm on the island, and Ivica and I are talking every day and video calling each other on Skype. And one day after my ex had broken into my room again, it was absolutely trashed. Okay. My clothes were all cut up again. Things were pulled out, trashed just all over the floor. It was just same typical thing happening. Ivica was calling me, and I just did my best to just get on the call, smile, and pretend everything was okay. But I knew it wasn't, and I really didn't want to tell him where my life was at this point, on the island. He knew everything else, but just where I was at this point in my life. I literally have nothing left to lose. So I told him, and I told him that I was really embarrassed. He immediately said I cannot stay there and organized for me to go live with one of his good friends, which I had actually met on our week together. He arranged everything like he always does. And all I had to do was just show up and I could live there and we would work something out and I would be safe there. It seems pretty erratic and maybe even irresponsible to literally move in with a guy I had really only just met for a week. But at this point in my life, I genuinely didn't have another option. So I agreed. I left the island. You see, this is the prayer. Remember, I prayed to God, like, what do I do? I don't know what I to do. And he literally told me, just wait, I've got another plan. And I didn't trust in him. This was the other plan. So while Ivica was away, I went to see a clairvoyant, as you do when you are a lost and in the demonic. So I figured it would be the best time to go see one. This clairvoyant was a man working out of a new age shop. He again read my past, present, future, as they do, and said something in the moment that I audibly heard the voice of the Lord again. The psychic said, "The man you're with now is not good for you, and you should proceed with caution." And as he said that, I heard the Lord say, "Do not listen to him. Get up now and leave. He's wrong." And I had every reason to believe that psychic. After all, he had my past correct, but the voice of God had never once let me down, and I trusted it. So Ivica came back from Canada. He made things. So it's interesting. Like when you look back at that, you can see how like the demons were like trying to stop it. Yeah, there's a big spiritual warfare against kingdom marriages, and those demons knew that, and they were trying to set. There was other things that they tried to do. They always try to sabotage God's plans. So Ivica came back from Canada, and he made things official with me, and we moved in together on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia, because he wanted to start a new life away from the past. This is where things took an interesting turn. I made it clear from the start that I am broken. I am a broken woman and I need a lot of help. Okay, so Ivica offers to pay for me to go see a psychologist or whatever I needed. He's very good like that. Whatever you need, I'll pay for it. But I was reluctant to go down that path again because I've been there numerous times and it's the same old thing. I said, I'll figure something else out. This is when I navigate down into the occult and took Ivica along with me for the ride. He wanted to support me in my search for healing, but he's also very intelligent and was drawn to the occult as well for other reasons. He has his testimony as well. He'd never explored it prior to meeting me, so he was interested in going down this road together. We studied everything together. We studied Tibetan Buddhism at Australia's largest Buddhist temple, astral projection, trance mediumship, spell work, blood magic. I was doing blood magic. He didn't want no part in that. Numerology, astrology, channeling, tarot cards, angel cards, akashic records, psychic, mediumship, Reiki, spiritual healings, runes, past life regression, chakra balancing, breath work. I mean, we literally studied everything. I completed many also healing modalities like on myself, like going to practitioners, like such as NLP, hypnotherapy, acupuncture. I was really big into that. Sound baths, energy healing, breath work, incantations, the emotion code, Mora, bioresonance therapy, frequency things, all of that, EFT, tapping, shadow work. Like I was going around to all these practitioners for healing. It all just made so much sense, okay, to us at the time that we were getting deeper and deeper involved in it. I joined a coven of witches. Yep, and I attended a spiritual church with them. I became so good at the craft and my prophetic gift labeled as being a clairvoyant psychic. And obviously at the time, I thought, oh my gosh, this all makes sense. This is what my gift that has followed me my whole life is meant. It all makes sense. This is what I'm meant to do. Okay. And they were really the first ones, these witches were the first ones that explained to me what it was and how to use it. So clairvoyance and psychic works i- are the devil's counterfeit for God's gift of prophecy. So on the surface, they may look the same, but one is from God and the other is from the devil. And if you're unaware, like I was at the time, then when you have people describing it so perfectly to you, it's easy to adopt that belief system for it, right? So I believe so many of God's modern prophets are suffering because they are born with a gift and the churches are either not acknowledging it or they're not nurturing it. But the New Age and witchcraft welcomes prophets as clairvoyants with open arms. So I started working at the local markets doing clairvoyant readings and had a very high accuracy rate starting this off. Okay. It didn't take long. It was really interesting actually because the tarot is really it's really in depth. But when I first started doing this, I realized that I was freaking freaking people out just sitting there reading for them and there were no cards. And at the time like they people were really freaked out by that. So I ended up buying a packet of tarot cards and before I actually studied each and every card, I wasn't even reading the cards, but it put something in between me and the client so they stopped freaking out as much. But I could read just on demand like this. And it didn't take long for this new business to take off. I had been with Ivica a few years by this stage, and he was developing his own special gifts and skills too. But he was still working away in the mines, and us being apart so much was straining the relationship. So we decided to move to a new town together and start a business operating in the new age and occult practices. We hold transcendental meditation classes and women's circles weekly. Energy clearings, house clearings. We worked with breaking curses, although we thought, past life regression, spell work, crystal healing. I opened up a school of witchcraft and then started initiating witches and warlocks into it and teaching absolutely everything that we had learned up until this point. So we had 22 services on our website just to give you an idea of how in depth we went with this. Like we weren't just one thing. We were a multitude, like a smorgasbord of demonic activities. Okay, this is what we were doing. We were really in depth with this. Um, so and that school of witchcraft that we had was one of the services. So it was a few short months, and I was invited onto the local radio station. Like literally, this took off. So I was invited to the local radio station to do like tarot readings on their breakfast show. And then not long after that, I was doing national TV. I was on national TV doing clairvoyant readings on there. We became incredibly successful. We were driving a brand new sports car. We had $1 million apartment we were living in. I had a regular celebrity clientele base. Like I'm talking like high up clients, like popular like celebrities, okay? And I had them on the regular. And on the outside it looked like we had a perfect life, and I genuinely thought that I had found healing. Like this, I literally thought this was my life's purpose. Cuz like look, I come from the projects, everything that you've just listened to, and I've just landed here. Of course, you know? So the deeper I surrendered to the occult and the new age practices of witchcraft and pantheism, the worse things become. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the impact that demons had on my mind, manifesting thoughts of suicide and crippling anxiety. I'd check in with my higher self that would tell me I was just picking up on the energy of other people, or the planets and the placements in astrology were affecting me. Like it's a demonic hamster wheel. All of these other excuses, all occultists make up because of the lies they convince themselves to avoid the truth and to avoid reality. So, of course, I'd practice more divination, which only buried me further and deeper into this occult demonic deception, and unknowingly inviting more demons into my body, my mind, and my life even more. I thought I could manifest my entire life exactly how I wanted it by getting into a vibrational frequency. I'd sage my home and put crystals out under every single full moon and teach others to do the same too, because that's how I thought I was cleansing negative energy. I was very thorough at grounding techniques, cleansing myself after each client, clearing my chakras, literally everything that I was supposed to do, I was doing it. And I didn't skip a beat because I invested everything into this, which is why I was recognized globally for being a teacher and running my metaphysical school. It's a witchcraft school. However, it is all complete lies and excuses for a deceptive lifestyle and delusionment, because I was heading in this direction. It's Satan who has oppressed my soul, and he does oppress people's soul when you come into agreement and do these things. After all, the devil paints a pretty picture, right? So my life started to fall apart from the inside out. Not on the outside, it didn't look like that, but on the inside it was. I had depression and it was getting worse. I had anxiety and it was getting worse. I started having health complaints and literally felt like I was under attack by something and didn't recognize at the time what it was. The way it affected me was chronic fatigue. It was so bad. I was literally sleeping so much. I couldn't get out of my bed at one point. My adrenals just shut down, and I literally felt like I was going to die. Like I was really sick. I got very very sick. I saw a lot of doctors, scans, bloods taken, everything kept coming back as normal, even though something was seriously wrong and nobody was able to help. This wasn't a burnout. This was the repercussions of a demonic attack, because at this point, I believed I was doing good in the world and doing God's work. I just had such a skewed understanding of God because of all the pain and trauma of my upbringing. So the reality is, I was playing with the devil while trying to do God's work, and Satan hated me for that. And God couldn't protect me. You see, you cannot eat from the Lord's table and from the devil's. It doesn't work like that. You're literally either with God or you're against him. Jesus himself even said you cannot serve two masters. So like, if you have this is the thing, so many lost little lambs, they get caught up in it. They have a good heart. I have a good heart. Like, I genuinely cared for people, but because of that, like, Satan can't really, he can only do so much with me, because I obviously didn't want to destroy people and do bad things to them, right? But he could only take me so far because I genuinely have a good heart. Like, I don't belong to him, right? I belong to the Lord. I'm his. So does that make sense? So he at this point, he's taken me as far as he can really get me. Like I've got the keys to his kingdom as such, you know. Like he's gifted me all and blessed me with all these material things, but then what? You know? So obviously this yeah, obviously this bled into other areas of my life and started affecting the work I was doing, and it was impacting my relationship with Ivica as well. My failing health was actually a catalyst for Ivica. So around this time, he actually stopped doing the occult practices for work and he shifted his entire focus to natural health and healing. It was always a passion for his, but now he needed to dedicate everything to it because he was trying to save me. Ivica was able to help me overcome my health challenges. He really is an absolute genius when it comes to health challenges, as many of you already know. That I honestly, I swear to you that that man is an angel. And he's just like, I always say this, I swear he's an angel and he's just been told by God, don't tell anyone down there because just speak to him. Go to his website. Look at his products. It's phenomenal. He's a really special man. But the anxiety inside of me. So he was healing me with my health, but the emotional, like the spiritual side, the anxiety and the depression, it didn't lift. And there were things that I was battling with eternally, including suicidal thoughts that would take over. And I didn't want to burden Ivica and put that much on him, you know, because I was serious, but I was seriously suffering with these things. It had been a long time since I spent any real time with my family. Okay. So at this point, my eldest niece, she was turning 18, and I felt a longing to go back and be with them. In the same time away, I put the past behind me and genuinely love my family with all my heart. And I wanted to be closer to them. So I made the decision to move closer to them. I'm sure you can imagine that didn't go down so well. Everyone is a lot older now, and there's grandchildren who are coming of age. So there wasn't really any more violence anymore, but you have to remember I am the family scapegoat, and that's a family dynamic that you could never escape. So this means that there was a lot of verbal abuse, manipulation, and things would be blamed on me and gaslit. We had some good times together, but it was also tainted by verbal and emotional abuse. So, a significant event happened at Christmas of 2019. We were at my parents' house preparing to go to my sister's house on Boxing Day for a barbecue. Ivica had stepped out briefly to go grab some coffees for us while he was out. So he's out of the house. An argument broke out between my younger brother and I because I asked him to turn his music down. My nephew was there. He is severely autistic, and I noticed he wasn't responding well to the music. My younger brother just lost it and had a tantrum. He came up to me, grabbed me by the hair, and was punching my head. I grabbed my phone to record it. I know my family's gaslightings and how things go, and I wanted to show Ivica because these people make you think you're insane and you're making it up, right? So I just grab my phone and instantly start recording it. Because if it says the only person, he knows this family dynamic well. Okay. So my younger brother grabbed a bottle of water that was sitting on the coffee table and just starts pouring it over me. Then he grabs the gifts I gave him for Christmas and threw them at me. I told him to stop it, that there were children here. With that, he grabbed his belongings, went out the door, and drove away. Despite having video evidence, my parents still tried to gaslight me, blame me, and tell me that it was my fault and that he didn't hit me and that I was making it up. I literally just moved my whole life down here to be closer to my family. My mother kept telling me to apologize to him because I upset him. Yep. So it was honestly so nonsensical. I couldn't believe that this was happening all over again after all these years. It was almost 12 months before I saw my younger brother again, and we all agreed to just forgive and forget, or as my mum prefers to call it, just to sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. The depression and anxiety start growing, and around mid 2020, my mental health took a turn for the absolute worst. I know what you're thinking. Pandemic, right? Nope. While everyone else was worried about the pandemic, I had a whole bucket of crazy going on because I had moved away from having a school of witchcraft. I started getting more involved in network marketing, and I grew a team of women. I was working with. Okay. So, unfortunately, because of the communities I was involved in, like with witchcraft, the occult, new age, all of that, I brought on a lot of broken people from that field onto my team with this network marketing company, right? And in what was a pure act of evil, several of the women got together and launched disgusting attack on me, spreading all sorts of lies. It was truly one of the worst experiences in my life. I really like, because I became close to these women. Like, I genuinely went out of my way for them. Like, I really loved on them. I thought that they were my friends. Okay. The sad reality is all of these women have mental health issues. I'm not kidding, all of them. And they were practicing witchcraft, and I was teaching them witchcraft. Like, oh, it was just demonic, okay? Which always they always go hand in hand with each other, by the way. Like mental health issues and witchcraft, it goes hand in hand. They were just toxic people, very, very toxic people. The demons were having an absolute field day through them because those demons knew it wouldn't take much more to just push me over the edge. And I was on the brink of a total reality collapse. These women were inventing lies to ruin me in every single way possible. I let them into my life, my home. I shared so much with them. And this betrayal and attack went on for 3 months straight. 3 months. Like vicious women. Okay. At the same time, the Lord was working through me and helping me to have revelations about the new age and occult being demonic, and that Satan was very real. Like, it was really interesting. Like, he literally just started. He's he's very gracious, okay, our Lord, and he just started to, yeah, just give me these revelations about things. It was really interesting. It was like my eyes started to become more open, and I started to ask more questions. Like, yeah, I remember it very clearly. The Lord speaking to me about this and the spiritual warfare on my life. It was immense, as Satan was using everything at this point. He was using every person at his disposal to tear me down while the Lord was trying to draw me closer to him. At the end of 2020, I had a total reality collapse. Absolute total reality collapse. Like, I'm not even kidding. I literally said to Avita, I probably have to go to a mental home. Like, you got to lock me up. Like, I'm done. I'm actually done at this point. Like, I what I had based my entire career and life on and thought I found healing in, right? Turned out to not be the answer, and that was a heavy tower that crashed down. I just I just started to realize this isn't it. This isn't the answer. It's lies, and I'm pretty sure Satan is definitely real. And this is like all of these revelations just were coming to me from the Lord, and the floor literally collapsed out from underneath me. All the healing and understanding of life itself unraveled, and I felt like I was back at square one. So in January of 2021, I found myself in a women's rehab facility. Yep, I went to rehab. That's when you know things are truly messed up, when you're in rehab and it's not because you're addicted to drugs or alcohol. I was in there because I needed to get away and figure myself out. I was suicidal and seriously at the end of the road. I didn't want to be here anymore. I just wanted to put an end to the pain and the grief. I genuinely thought God had made a mistake when he made me, and I went to take my own life. But in a very, very last moment, desperate decision, I cried out to the Lord instead. The prayers I cried to the Lord were deep and harrowing and heavy. When I tell you, I poured every bit of my soul into prayer for him to please help me. I was literally begging him, please help me. You have to help me. Like, what am I meant to do now? Like, help me, please. Like, there was no sinner's prayer. It was just messy and just full of heart. Like, I just really wanted him more than anything. I was at the absolute end of my road and at the end of my life. Like, it is literally the end. I have a beautiful and supportive partner Ivica, who felt totally helpless. I couldn't stop crying, and at the same time, I felt like my soul had left my body. I was totally disassociated, an empty shell of a woman, and I was exhausted by just life itself. I already grew up in an exhausting environment as a child, and childhood trauma changes you. When things go unhealed, they compile, and you get to a point where you either develop personality disorders if left untreated or worse. I came to the foot of the cross, the very last place I ever thought I would be at. Now that you know me a little bit more, you know that is definitely the last place I would have turned. I studied Satanism and dived in deep into witchcraft. I was 15, living a life of defiance because I genuinely thought God was sick and disgusting for giving me life, for giving me the worst life circumstances I endured. I blamed him for so many years. And the cold-hearted family that I grew up in, I blamed God for all of that when that literally wasn't the plans for God. I was humbled and so open to the truth at this point because you see, you come to the end of yourself. You have to be broken in order to be made new again, right? And so because I had nothing left, that's why I was ready for miracles and healing to take form. I wanted that more than anything. I didn't care about me. I just wanted Jesus. Like whatever you want, I'm all in. Let's go. I've got nothing. And I've got nothing left to give except my soul, but that's all he wanted. I just wanted more of Jesus than I did of myself. So I was wholeheartedly ready to listen to him and for him to move his hand in my life. So as it turns out, the Lord did hear my cries for help. The rehab facility that I happened to attend was Christian. I didn't know that it was Christian, and they had faith-based practices were at the forefront of every single day. I was there for 6 weeks, and I made huge progress. So then I continued at home with psychotherapy and moving closer to the Lord. So I switched off all my social media for the whole year to focus solely on my healing and my faith in Jesus. Every single day I prayed. I still pray every day. Every day. I read the Bible and I put it all into practice. What I was reading, you think you're reading the Bible, it's reading you. Like I was reading, and every day my relationship with the Lord grew stronger and stronger. I didn't have a lukewarm faith. I was literally on fire for Jesus. Literally, I was all in, baby. Instead of taking my own life, I gave my life to Jesus, and that is what healed me. The therapy took the sting out of the burn for sure. My therapist probably has a swimming pool now, thanks to me. But it helped me to learn more about trauma I had experienced in my life and helped me to understand different parts of myself. It wasn't what healed me. The going to the therapist wasn't what healed me. I have to say that field of psychology has changed greatly since I was a child being forcefully medicated. But those horrible experiences in my youth forced me to search for healing in the new age and the occult, witchcraft, all of that. But now I was able to experience psychotherapy again in a new and helpful way without any medication at all. So at this point, my life is improving every single day. I prayed to the Lord with all my heart to move me closer to Him. It was around the middle of 2021. Oh, by the way, Ivica gets saved at the same time as me. So I come home from rehab and I'm just like, I'm literally a different woman. Like I'm literally like the woman that he knows was inside of me this whole time. I'm that. And yeah, he knew this was it. He didn't hesitate. He gave his life to the Lord as well. So it was around the middle of 2021. And in a whirlwind that sideblinded me, I stopped talking to my whole family for good. You're probably all like, finally. The short explanation is that my nieces were now in their early 20s, okay, and they're partying hard. They were talking to me about their drug habits and how innocent their mother was. I was extremely worried about them because I had lived this road that they were getting literally they were getting the same drugs from the same drug dealers I had rolled around with all those years ago. Like I was like, what? So I was very worried about them. Okay. And yeah. So I knew that their mother had wisdom inside of her from her own experiences that she could share with her daughters if she really wanted to. But I was wrong. I was wrong. Okay. My sister is an avoider and a manipulator, just like my mother. I told my nieces to talk to their mother, and their mother ended up denying everything. Okay. Then she turned on me for telling the truth to her daughters. Then I told her that her daughters were doing drugs and needed help. My nieces denied it and made up lies about me. Then my mother gets involved and tells me I should have lied about it all and it's my fault. I'm the family scapegoat, remember? It's all the same spirit of Jezebel running through that family and repeating toxic cycles. And now that has extended to my nieces because they have watched how the family have treated me their whole life. The long and the short of it is now I had the strength of Jesus inside of me and I was capable of walking away from these toxic people once and for all. Don't get me wrong. I love my family. I pray for them every single night and every single one of them. I pray for good health for them. I pray for their salvation. I beg God that they get led into heaven. Like when I tell you I love them, I truly do love them. I love them so much, but they're toxic. They're so toxic and they're just harmful to me. They're horrible. So when they're full of demons and they refuse to change, like I have to guard my own deliverance. Like I can't be around that. I literally I can't. I never know what's gonna happen. It's too erratic, man. I won't allow them to hurt me anymore. Sometimes the wisest decision any one of us can make is to love people from a distance because you are 100% entitled to protect yourself. The Lord told me that the constant drama and abuse was keeping me from Him, and He had to remove my family from my life to protect me and keep me safe because I had given my whole life to Him. I was now completely under His protection and covered by the blood of Jesus. And this is and he also had to come and intervene because I had trauma bonding with my family, obviously. And so I wouldn't have been able to do it myself. That I just loved them too much, you know? So this is what it meant for me to be a chain breaker in my family. By the grace of God, Jesus set me free and He broke those chains. The cycle ends with me. So I start to develop my relationship with the Lord, and He is continuing to guide me like a protective father does. I kept asking God the biggest questions because, like, I'm literally building this relationship with the Lord, right? And I'm asking big questions. Why did you place me in a home upbringing like that? It was like living a nightmare every single day. I was literally just a child trying to survive. I had no love from either of my parents or my siblings. I was so abused and broken daily. And it has created the most cracked foundation for me to try and live a life from. And then on top of that gift, I have this gift that you've given me and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. How could you do that to any child? And I was like literally just pouring out into prayer to him. Like, how could you do that? It's like giving them a backpack full of bricks and sending them into an ocean with rough seas and telling them to just swim through it. And with that, he spoke words over me and my life. And he said, Kayla, my daughter, I made your heart sensitive to my spirit because you are to be a prophetess and light up rooms with my message. I made you ambitious so you could swim to shore with those bricks, and your backpack will build you a stable home where you can show others the way. Your gift is to ignite fire inside of those whose light has dissipated and to give them a map to a better life for themselves. Many of the things that you blame me for were not my will. I send my strongest warriors for my biggest battles, and I have great plans for you. I always have, even before I stitched you in your mother's womb. He just spoke life over me, and I had all this clarity and understanding that and remorse. Just, oh, it wasn't you, God. You had other plans for me. This is how the devil comes in, and then we blame God for things that the devil has destroyed. So then at the end of 2021, I had a setback, but as the Lord does, He actually turned it into a blessing because you're when you're under His covering, it's completely different. So I felt something wasn't quite right with me, and it felt like I was backsliding a bit. I was having these thoughts again, and the noise and the confusion, depression, and it was all coming back. And the Lord led me to Deliverance to discover what that was, right? And so in early 2022, Vitsa and I performed Deliverance on each other in our living room together. He's actually got the exact script up. Like we literally, oh my gosh, we were up. We were researching like through Derek Prince books, everything. Like, and we was just like, let's go get it. Like, let's do it now. We'll just print up a script and we'll do it on each other in the lounge room. Like oh my gosh, it was so powerful and it worked. It worked. So he's actually got that exact script up on his website, so you can check that out. All the links, by the way, are in the description of this video. But to tell you it was life changing is an understatement. We were truly made new and learned firsthand the truth about demonic oppression, what it looks like and feels like, and how it moves in your life, especially having lived through the occult and now to experience the other side in the Christian faith. All the noise in my head was the demons that were tormenting me. And once they were gone, it was an instantaneous clarity and peace, like literal peace that has never left. And it's been like that ever since. Like, I'll just give you an example. Like, one of the demons that came out of me was the demon of grief. Like, it was the spirit of grief, I'm sorry. And like and to give you an example, like it sort of became normal for me every single time I would wake up in the morning, literally just normal, that I would just instantly feel depression. Like, like nothing's even happened yet. Why do I have this? Like, instantly. Like before my eyes have even opened, it's there. And since I've had Deliverance, right, it's not come back. It's complete peace. Like it's so much has shifted and changed because of Deliverance. It's truly life changing. It really is. So if it's and I got hitched in a private ceremony, don't worry, the actual big wedding is coming. I've got Pinterest boards full of gowns and bouquets. Marriage was obviously something that became important to us after having Deliverance. Actually, by the grace of God, what we were going to do, and our whole plan was to do hand fasting, which is like literally a witchcraft ritual that you do when two people are allegedly getting married. I am so grateful we never did that. Could you imagine? So yeah, we didn't do that. We ended up getting hitched, and so yes, so I'm very grateful that that never happened. But obviously, that became important to us after having Deliverance and wanting to live in accordance to the Word of God and be in a covenant with the Lord and each other, and to just start a completely new life together under the covering of the Lord. So the Lord literally transformed my life. He renewed my heart and my mind. I, I'm not the same woman. Like, I'm genuinely not. Like, it's me. It's still Kayla. My personality is here, but like all the cloud, everything that Satan tried to destroy, it's gone. Like, all of that has gone. Like, I'm completely made new. Do you know, just to give you an example, to do this testimony, like I had forgotten that this is a lot of my life. I had to pray to the Lord and ask Him for the memories back. Like, leading up to this, it has been so rough for me because it's like, oh, that's right, that did happen. But we're made new in Christ. We're literally made a new creation. Like, He just, I just love Him so much. So I put Jesus first above all else. He is my whole life. He healed so many parts of my soul where I feel like for the first time in my life, I can exhale. And the joy has never left me since. I have peace that literally surpasses all understanding, that has also never left me. I am eternally grateful. My soul is saved, and I have been delivered from a life that tried in every single way to take me out, as you've just learnt today. For many years, I woke up each day battling depression, anxiety, and it was a constant companion. And I would nervously bite my nails until they bled. I was diagnosed with trauma bonding, which is also known commonly as Stockholm syndrome, with my abusers, complex PTSD. It's also called CPTSD, and there were suggestions of borderline personality disorder, although I never formally got diagnosed with that. But towards the end, this was like, it was I was in a bad way. Just before surrendering my life to Jesus, I exhibited signs of borderline personality disorder. At the age of 15, I was also diagnosed with ADD and oppositional defiance disorder, which is called ODD for short. I want you to understand this clearly. I no longer carry any of those burdens: anxiety, depression, complex trauma, trauma bonding, CPTSD, BPD, ADD, ODD. They're all completely gone from my life, my mind, and my body. It's all been restored through just giving my life to Jesus. I didn't like, I was doing all of these heavy, let me tell you something really interesting. Every single religion that I've ever studied, and I've studied a lot, right? They are heavy in the works. We are not saved by works. It's all by grace. And your works reflect being saved. Like it's the opposite. It's incredible. Like it truly is. The Lord in his infinite grace and mercy has brought about complete healing and restoration. He's ushered in a brand new chapter and a brand new me. So I finally understand that I'm not a clairvoyant. That's a label given in the new age. It's witchcraft. It's demonic. I'm a prophetess of God, which means I give glory to the Lord, and the messages I still receive are from him, backed by scriptural evidence. My gifts are still the same. The Lord gifted me them from birth. Only this time I'm guided by Jesus instead of the tarot and all of those demonic foolish things, and he speaks to people through me. I am a messenger for the kingdom of God. I have a deep love and respect for the Bible. I love people. I genuinely love people. If you haven't figured that out by now, I'm a friendly person, but I just genuinely love on people. It is, but I love the Bible so much because it is the living word of God. And whilst I have air in my lungs, I will preach about the goodness of the Lord until the day he calls me home. So I'm here, raw and vulnerable, honest. My makeup is absolutely ruined from bawling my eyes out doing this. And I'm letting you know how my life has been completely transformed. What the enemy attempted to steal from me, the Lord not only restored, but he multiplied abundantly. He is the most high God, full of grace, and his love is an unceasing river, a wellspring that satisfies every longing of your soul and beyond. I now spend days hand painting prophetic customized Bibles and doing prophetic calls with members of the body of Christ to strengthen, encourage, and comfort people who God leads to me. And this podcast, which I'm equipping you, saints, with for spiritual warfare. When I had nothing. It crumbled but beneath me. When I say the Lord transformed my life, I truly mean it. I would never have thought I would be doing, never, ever, ever thought he would give me back a new life. Like, there's no way. I mean, I gave up everything for him, and he has provided me with so much more than I ever deserved. He has given me a platform to reach people and to work and he's blessed the work of my hands to paint Bibles, to paint Bibles. The Lord is really using me, and I'm profoundly humbled by that. So let me encourage you. If you are in a dark place, unsure of your next steps or what direction to take, give your whole heart to Jesus. He will transform your life and fill those missing pieces, just as the Bible promises us in John 10:10, that Satan's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy, but God's purpose is to give you a rich and satisfying life. Friends, if my testimony has stirred your heart and you feel the Holy Spirit drawing you closer, I want you to make the most important decision of your entire life. If you're ready to give your life to Jesus, then we can say a prayer together. But honestly, it's not about works. It's really just it's all about what's in your heart, and you have to just be genuine, because sometimes people, they say like a sinner's prayer or whatever, but they don't truly mean it. Or other people force their friends to say, just say this prayer so you get into heaven. But it's truly about what's in your heart. So like for me, how I got saved is I literally just in a bawling mess cried out, God save me, please, Jesus, please help me. Like that'll do it. Because it's just what's in your heart. But you can say this prayer to me if you're watching this right now and you want to give your life to Jesus. All right. So, Lord Jesus, I need you. I confess that I am a sinner in need of your grace. I believe that you are the Son of God, that you died on the cross for my sins, and that you rose from the dead. Today, I turn from my sins and open the door of my heart and life to you, Lord. I receive you as my best friend and my Lord and Savior. Thank you for forgiving me of my sins and giving me eternal life. Take control of my life, Lord, and make me the person you created me to be. In your precious name, I pray. Amen. So, if you prayed that prayer, welcome to the family of God. The angels are rejoicing in heaven, and so are we. Oh, beloved friends, what an absolute journey we have shared together. I just want you to know that I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to share my testimony with you. I was so nervous. You know, when you can feel people praying for you, I literally felt your prayers. And I wanted to just stop. And I was like, don't look at the comments. I will literally start bawling my eyes out. But I could feel you interceding. And it's so beautiful. The kindness of your hearts. God's children are honestly, always pray to him about that. Like their hearts are so pure. They literally, God's children literally have the fruits of the spirit. They're kind-hearted. They're pure-hearted. Like they're genuine. Like it's beautiful. But yeah, this has been quite the journey, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to share my testimony with you. The faithfulness of our Lord never ceases to amaze me. And I pray that my story has encouraged you to, walk your own walk with him too. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind you that I have prepared a treasure trove of resources just for you, and you'll find them in the description of this video to help you grow deeper in your faith. And I'm also obviously going to be doing regular podcasts of just I'm literally exposing Satan's playbook. You think he's going to be happy about that? He literally tried to take me out so many times, right? And I'm going to be exposing page by page. Like I am literally going to be teaching you about everything. Like yeah, he don't want that to happen, okay? So it's coming, and this is what you can expect from me moving forward. But my friends, if the Holy Spirit leads you to support my ministry, there's a link for you to sow into what God is doing here. Your generous contributions make it possible for me to continue spreading the good news and providing these resources to more people and equip the saints for spiritual warfare, because I am going to expose everything about Satan piece by piece for you, episode by episode. Now, I'm obviously just going to stay back for a little while and hang out with you and answer the questions that you might have. So don't hesitate to reach out and just like put a comment, because I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being part of this community and your friendship. It truly, honestly means the world to me. And I genuinely pray that the Lord keeps you and may his face shine upon you. Until next time, keep seeking him with all your heart, okay? I love you guys so much.